Call to order our Public Safety Finance Strategic Support Committee meeting, and if we can get a roll call, please.
Councilmember Jimenez.
Here.
Councilmember Arenas.
Here.
Chair Perales.
Here.
Well, quorum.
Thank you. And we don't have any items being recommended or dropped for the work plan. Do any of my colleagues have any changes to the work plan? And if not, if we can get a motion to approve.
Move to approve the work plan.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. We have nothing on the consent, so we're on to item D1, our fireworks ordinance work plan status report. We will hear the report, and then we have some members of the public that would like to speak. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. I'm Ryan Doolin, Deputy Director of the Fire Department, and with me today I have program partners Rachel Roberts, Deputy Director of Code Enforcement, Captain Michael Kim with the Police Department, and Hector Estrada, the city's Fire Marshal. The memo lays out all the activities that occurred since the last update last year. I'll briefly go over the program to date, some of the highlights and what the data is showing us, and the new items implemented this year, and lessons learned and next steps. So the city is just wrapped up our third year of fireworks, and we really focused in the first couple of years on education outreach and reporting. We were taking significant steps to operationalize these two components as they're major components of the fireworks program. The last element is enforcement, and there is still opportunity to now tackle the hardest element and area that most cities are trying to figure out how to address. The goals of the program continue to be reduce injuries and fires, increase the number of actionable reports, and decrease the number of hotspots. And you'll see from the statistics that we've made some significant steps in that direction. What the data is showing significantly during the 4th of July, specifically during the 4th of July reporting period, is that we had 15 fires and 0 medical emergencies. Those fires were broken down into 7 vegetation fires, and with the remaining 8 really small fires that were put out by just residual fireworks on the ground, and then also trash and rubbish fires. We did see a 75% increase in actionable reports from the 2018 4th of July reporting period, so that was significant and does show that we are making an impact on the program. Online reporting periods not containing enough information, which was reported last reporting cycle, for the city to take an action dropped by 5%. So last year it was about 97% of those reports did not have enough information for the city to take action, and this year it dropped down to 92%. So those are two critical goals that we have achieved, even though they're small for an issue like fireworks that many cities are struggling to address. Those are significant steps in the right direction. Enforcement actions include primarily ones that were done by police department, but 2 arrests out in the field and 1 field citation by PD. With 7 online citations, code enforcement did a very thorough job at reviewing the over 1,900 reports that we received the last reporting period, with 150 warnings, and that was significantly up, like I said, about 75% actionable reports than what was reported last year. And we confiscated about 300 pounds of illegal fireworks. New items for the 4th of July this year reporting period, some of them implemented even prior to New Year's and Lunar New Year this year. We did lose Chris Mills, so he was actually the developer and primary person that created the platform several years ago in 2016. However, the fire department has taken over this responsibility and made all of the recent updates to the tool. So we've had that transition and actually taken on that responsibility. Fire department also initiated regular reporting at the Neighborhoods Commission, which I reported as the next steps last year. And our goal was to really, this is a citywide issue, and to really get the information out to the different neighborhood and communities but also to receive information across the city on what's not working, what some challenges are, and also to solicit their help to get the word out. Code enforcement, we did listen to the community, and we actually conducted a community survey at the end of last year on the 2018 4th of July, and we also just received all of the responses to those community surveys for this 4th of July. So we have some comparative information that code enforcement is going through and has some updates. Fire department reached out and actually expanded our partnership with community schools. So last year we did a lot around emailing and getting the word out to parents, but this year, and I'll have some pictures that you can see, we actually utilized the digital boards that we've never done in prior years, and we were able to get the messages out before students went on vacation this year. One other thing that we heard from the community is just the ability to have the reporting tool in multiple languages. So fire department IT staff actually was able to add the Google translation services to the online reporting tool, and that's what enhances the tool to have the ability to translate the service into about 106 languages across with just a click by the user interface. We also, code enforcement, followed up with a reporting party, so this was another follow-up item from the community, specifically the Stop Illegal Fireworks Committee members on following up and providing the disposition of reports from the reporting parties. So we actually have reached out to all the submitted reporting parties and let them know that whether or not their report ended up being a warning or a citation, so that they would have the latest information on that. And then we partnered again with Santa Clara County Fire Department and expanded the education outreach with cities within the region. I'll show you some examples, but we also see other cities and towns within the Santa Clara County area adopting our messaging. So we believe this prior years we were going back to the drawing board and coming up with various messaging, and we feel like we have it right. Now we see other regional partners also adopting our regional messaging campaign. So here's the education and outreach for school partnering. You'll see that the digital boards unfortunately does not really come through when you're taking a picture, but the clarity on the Andrew P. Hills High School, we had lots of engagement by their principal, as well as Dartmouth and Lee High School. So Lee High School actually put up banners, so they printed up their own banners. We provided them the artwork, and they displayed that around their campus. In addition to the 33 fire stations displaying their banners and also police facilities with their headquarters and substation, we had outreach with the community centers, VTA buses, and light rail. This year we added pop-ups. So in prior years we had a challenge with coordinating with Public Works on getting the banners actually posted up on the facilities. So Communications Office did an excellent job at creating these pop-ups, which are ground level, and they're easy for the staff to deploy quickly. And they're now being used at our community centers and our libraries across the city. So they get all the foot traffic, but they're also easy to put up and take down from staff, so we don't have to have coordination with other city departments and also additional cost. Regional messaging is, you'll see on your right, It's Not Worth It is the other campaign that we're not really utilizing, but the committee last year was a sub-message that came out of the committee work, and these two messages are being adopted by the Santa Clara County Fire Department, but also several of our regional partners, City of Campbell, City of Saratoga, City of Los Altos, Santa Clara County itself, Santa Clara County, or Santa Clara Police Department, Palo Alto Police Department, and the Santa Clara County Board of Supervisors have all approved and adopted these for their messaging. So we're seeing that branch regionally. Another hit with the community and neighborhood associations was their development and the communications office did an awesome job on creating the social media kit. We've used this the last 2 years. They're pre-canned messages in all English, Spanish, and Vietnamese across all of the social media platforms. So we also use this for our Nextdoor and Facebook and Twitter. So this is where the community can go. It's right on our website. I've given a couple of presentations out into neighborhood associations, and this is something that they really like. They can just cut and paste and get it out to their community members. So some of the lessons learned from this last reporting period was the online reporting tool. We're still seeing a high percentage of reports containing insufficient or no information. However, the survey did give us quite a bit of insight into why people may not, their understanding of the reporting tool, or why they might not use the reporting tool, or some complexities that they're having. Some of the outcomes from that survey were the community's understanding of lack of enforcement and real-time enforcement, the lack of feedback on the disposition of reports, which we've resolved by actually communicating that to each of the reporting parties. And then suggestions were also part of the community survey, where the community was able to actually give the city any kind of suggestions on improvements. And those included dropping the exact address that people need to have in order to submit a report, being able to report things anonymously, and then adding a mapping tool to the online report. Some of the other areas, public education and outreach, we do see that effective messaging is critical in order to change behavior. So we've seen this last year when we had Behavioral Insights do a lot of work for us, and it looks like our messaging is moving the ball a little bit, and it's being adopted by our sister cities that are in our same region. And so I think people are going to get, we see the results of submitted reports going up. So I think people are now understanding that they could report illegal fireworks activity using the reporting tool, but it's also moving some of the calls off of our 911. And then the last one is community concerns. This is a big one, and does keep on coming up each year, is our lack of public safety presence to deter illegal activity. And then our next steps. In the program areas, messaging, outreach, and education activities to address suggestions received from the community survey. So a lot more discussion needs to be had on those suggestions and how to implement those. Maybe a little bit of tweaking on the education outreach, but the primary message is being received fairly well. The second one is in the reporting area. This is something that we have tried to actually implement, but the lack of resources have been challenging, but we are committed to producing an online tutorial video on how to use a reporting tool so that folks know what type of information is needed for the city to either issue a citation or a warning. And then this last one is the integration of My San Jose app, having one place, one-stop kind of shop mechanism to report issues to the city with all of the other services that the city offers. And then the last one is really utilizing some kind of sting operations, targeting the sale of fireworks, trying to get it at the cause of it and not actually at the result, since it's such a transient type of issue. And then lastly, I just wanted to wrap up the presentation by a special thanks to the program partners, specifically Maria Diaz-Perez in code enforcement, Edgar Martinez in fire, Oscar Carrillo in code enforcement, and Dean Whipple in our Bureau of Fire Prevention, as well as the representatives that you see here. I really could not have done this job over the last 2 years without them. So it's just everybody working across departments. It's very challenging, but I think we're doing a really good job, and we're moving the ball. So with that, conclude this presentation, and we're here to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Ryan. We do have 4 speakers from the public would like to come up first, so you can just come up and utilize the mic. The mic does kind of move up and down if you clip the little grab a little handle there. So we have Jeff Levine, Craig Chivatero, Suzanne Roan, and Tina Morrell. And you can go in whatever order you want. Just state your name for the record when you come up.
Yeah, I'm Jeff Levine. I'm the Vice President of the Roosevelt Park Neighborhood Association. And I want to challenge all of you to tell me to my face that we've been successful at this. We have not. All of these are little things that we've done that are dancing around the outsides of this. You're well aware of the issue. It's endemic in San Jose. We're 19 years into the 21st century. We're one spark away from a major fire that would cause a major catastrophe, and we have to do something. So what do? Okay, I think anything that we've done in the past, we have to figure it hasn't worked. We're just moving little baby steps at a time. If there was a cartel meth lab in my neighborhood, which there was near San Jose High, I wouldn't expect the San Jose Police Department to deal with that all by themselves. They would involve the FBI and other agencies, which was what happened that led to the bust of that cartel. When it comes to fireworks, there's no way, I don't see that the city of San Jose has the capability to do away with this issue. You need to partner with the county and all the other municipalities in the county, and maybe even at the state level, to put an end to this. You have to have some, and you can't wait till July 4th. It has to start 6 months or a year ahead of time, where you're working on disrupting the supply and really making some big busts that demonstrate to the public that we mean business in San Jose. Illegal fireworks are dangerous, and we're not going to tolerate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
What's that? Raul, you can relate to this, I hope. My dad used to play blocks with my son, since you're a new dad. And every time he started out playing blocks, he would say, first we have to start with a good foundation. Without clear and determined enforcement, there is no foundation to the fireworks prevention plan. The Stop Illegal Fireworks Committee has met with members of the police, the fire department innumerable times, including Chief Sapien, Chief Garcia. We have tried to work with the city, and I completely understand how hard this is. And I also understand how many excuses I hear. It boils down to this: the will to enforce is not here. I believe San Jose has made the reporting tool useless. I am hearing from people on our Facebook page and on Nextdoor, people don't even bother reporting anymore. It's ridiculous to ask for photographic evidence. It's not working. Maybe there's a few steps ahead, but right now, the way it is, I don't think it's working. Other cities are making it work. Both Salinas and Hollister had many citations, and we were asked to look into how their apps worked and what their enforcement policy is. Do you have any idea how hard it is for a private citizen to get into the police department and have them answer questions? This is the job of the city. The city doesn't want to put its resources into this problem, in my opinion. We've suggested repeatedly that 1 or 2 great big busts with immediate press release follow-ups could demonstrate to the public we mean business. Using hotspot locations that we've pointed out, you've had pictures, we've had addresses, we've had photographs of great big piles of debris.
You can finish up.
left-
Yeah,
Oh.
keep going.
Left over from fireworks, and the city has done nothing. They've known every year the fireworks are going to be at such and such a location. We've met with the police and said, please go there, and it hasn't happened. If there was a big bust in Alviso, and it was all over the news, do you think that everybody'd feel free to set off fireworks like they do? I don't believe so. The general opinion of the public is that the city is impotent and that the community is losing more and more respect for the willingness to participate in the folly of the city's lack of will to enforce its own laws. I'm sorry, I know you guys have all worked really hard, as we have, to change this, but that is the impression that I'm getting from all the people that communicate with me on this issue. I don't believe the city has any foundation in its work plan. I feel the city is criminally negligent in its lack of enforcement, and it's creating an unsafe and unlivable environment for all of us.
Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Tina Morrill. I live in the Vendome neighborhood, District 3. Thank you for your presentation, Ryan. So my message is I am fed up with the lack of enforcement. And I would like to specifically see less emphasis now on the reporting tool because it feels like it's just not working very well. I'd like to see more emphasis on field enforcement. And I'd like, when there are busts, I would like immediate advertising of the public, not waiting, but if there's a bust, on July 3rd, then a press release is issued either July 3rd or July 4th. This is what happened, here's the fine, we will not take it, and I think that that will add some teeth to the city's message that fireworks are illegal. I want to emphasize with field enforcement, I really think that we need to step up with technology and start using drones because it is dangerous for people to take pictures. It's dangerous for the police to be out there, especially like if you have a situation like El Viso. So we don't want the police to be in harm's way, but let's use technology. And as a community member, because I know the city of San Jose kind of got burned when they were going to be using a drone, I am happy to, if the city wants to send me to community meetings, I'll be the one to stand up and say, I'm completely for drone, using it for this specific purpose during these hours. Here's what it can do, here's what it can't do. Providing a little bit of relief to the community or some assurance that the lack of privacy issues that they're concerned about have already been thought about. So I'm happy as a community member to help out, to partner. The last thing I want to say is I was really upset, as with everybody, when the Gilroy shooting happened. And in the paper, somebody was quoted as saying, "At first I thought some idiot was setting off fireworks, but then I saw him." I think it's dangerous for us to become numb to the sound of fireworks because, more shootings are happening and I don't want people to think, oh, it's fireworks, and they don't take the proper measures. So again, I'd like to see more enforcement on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm a resident of D3. You've heard it several times. You're going to hear it again from me. Enforcement is the thing that's lacking today. I'm all in favor of the long-term educational initiatives. They need to go on. If we're going to get rid of the small-scale fireworks, that's an education problem. My concern specifically, and what I would draw attention to, is these large-scale aerial displays, these large shells launched by mortars. I was astonished when I was driving up on 4th of July this past year from Morgan Hill to see hundreds of shells going off over the city. These are not safe and sane. These are not the kinds of fireworks that you just pick up at a store. These are professional grade explosive devices. If we had one sitting here in the middle of the room, I imagine it would be an emergency. Fire would not treat that lightly. There are hundreds, if not thousands of them in the city today, stored in people's basements, stored in sheds, stored all over the place. That has to be a problem for the city, and we need to do something about it. And the way to do it is not to wait for the 4th of July. The time to do that is with law enforcement activity for the sales and purchase of these explosives. It needs to be dealt with urgently. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I'll pass it over to my colleagues first to see if there are any questions or comments? Councilmember Jimenez?
Well, thank you, everyone, for the information, certainly to the public. There's many residents in my district in South San Jose that are as equally concerned with some of the fireworks. You know, I know around this city, there are more certainly urbanized areas like downtown, but there's also suburban areas like the area I represent where it's up against a lot of hillsides. And so the idea of some of these fireworks potentially, and I'm sure things have happened already because some residents have told me, but really grass fires and building fires and things of that nature really concern me. And so I think this is a real problem. A few things before I go into my questions is that I think it's, for all the folks in here from the fire department, police department, I understand the frustration from the residents, but I can also say that I feel like we're doing the best we can given just the amount of resources we have. We can do better. I think we can do better, and some of the comments, as you'll see, I think we need to start rethinking the way we do things. The other thing, and I've told this to my residents, is I'm not sort of like homelessness. Certainly all of us desire to eradicate it, but and certainly not to equal it to homelessness. But the fireworks situation, I'm not sure we're ever going to get to a point where we eliminate every firework. And I'm not suggesting that's what people are saying, but I think this is a long-term thing we need to work on, and we're never going to be able to eradicate the usage of fireworks. Some of the things that came to mind to me as folks were talking and in talking to some of my residents is that I appreciate the view of staff that, I think we've done better than we have in the past, because it seems like for many years until, I think it was 2014, this really didn't get back on the radar, it seems, or maybe it was on the radar, I don't know, it was before my time. But I think it's on the radar, we're trying to figure it out, and so I very much appreciate the work, but I feel like the residents feel in that I think what we're currently doing, certainly we need a consistent baseline that needs to continue into the indefinite future of outreach, of education, things of that nature, information, informational campaigns of sorts, but I don't think we're getting what we need to do in order to make the public feel that we're properly addressing this. And for example, I mean, one of the statistics that was cited is that the percentage of information that we got that we couldn't take any action on it dropped 5 percentage points, but it went to 92%. It's still very high, right? So even though it was moving in the right direction, that is not. We're certainly not where we should be, and I'm not suggesting you're saying that, so I think it really speaks to the amount of work needed to solve this seemingly intractable problem. And so I just have a few questions, and then I have some thoughts and suggestions as to how I think maybe we need to rethink this. So one of the questions I had is with regard to hotspots. Some of my residents have called them other things, and they said they shouldn't even be called hotspots, but I'm trying to get a sense as to how we identify and determine where the hotspots are. Is it just a matter of number of calls, reports? And this might have been in a past report, so I apologize if I'm asking you something that's so obvious, but if
That's what
someone
we're
can
here for.
touch on that, please.
Yeah, so those are police calls for service. So staff actually, we do agree that probably the word hotspots is not an accurate reflection. That was adopted before I actually took over and we started building a program around that. But that is calls, PD or police calls for service, and it's anything over 1. So if that's why we have 62, right? 62 of them, that's even a lot. But in some of those areas, it could be only 1 or 2 calls for service that's identified. And that's something that police can maybe elaborate on a little bit more.
And so if there are folks in here in this room, I'm sure some of them spoke, that are watching this extremely closely, more closely than I or you maybe during 4th of July, if they were able to identify so-called hotspots and say, look, on this street, on this block, on this cul-de-sac, this is where it happens every single year, and they don't call the police, right? But is there a way to identify that as a hotspot without them having to call the police if they just give you the information?
So what we haven't done is did a data overlay, so police calls for service. with the reporting tool, so the addresses on the reporting tool, which would take some analysis and staff time to do that. We have not did an overlay. So what we have called hotspots is just police for service, calls for service right now.
Okay. All right, so I think that's maybe something we can work on, and I realize it's gonna take funding and time, but as I said before, when we've discussed other things at the city, I think it was the equity discussion for any of you who were following that. I think a comment that I made that I think resonates here is like, we find money for things we think are important, and so if we think this is important, I think during the budget cycle and such, we can certainly, I think, find the resources necessary to give you the manpower, the woman power to help figure this out. So thank you for that. The other question I had is just to get thoughts from folks from police and fire, because some of my residents, and I haven't heard this firsthand or heard this myself, but some of my residents said that they felt that some of the information coming out, like the public information officers from fire and police and other folks, aren't always on the same page with regards to the way they describe fireworks and the usage and you know, for folks being thoughtful. Is there any coordination between the different departments as to sort of a concerted, consistent message that we're trying to put out to the community?
So there is. We have some things to tighten up, so it's not perfect, and that is something that we talked about after this last 4th of July, is making sure that we have one spokesperson, one department as the key contact, and that all of the other departments, PIOs, know who that person is and have them available. So that is a change or a improvement that we will be working on and implement right now.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah.
The other thing I think was important, I think there was a percentage in the report, I think it was, there was some polling that was done, I think it was, it said, it's on page 4, and at the bottom it says 66% of respondents did not know police fire would not immediately respond.
That's correct.
And so, so it seemed to me, based on that they were expecting a response, and they realized, oh, actually didn't know you weren't gonna respond.
That's correct.
And so that tied to this consistent message that I've heard from my residents that, that folks, and maybe trying to think how it lines up with this statement, but for many folks that think and know and have the sense and the feeling that police and fire weren't going to respond, or no one was going to come out and actually do anything about the fireworks. I understand we have constraints and challenges staffing up on those nights that are particularly busy, but I just wonder, one thing I desire is to try to figure out a way where we can break down, I don't think that's a healthy feeling for a resident to have, that think, we're going to call, no one's showing up, nothing's going to be done. And I think that perpetuates this frustration that we see from folks and comments that have been made. And so to the extent we could think about how to take that apart and make it so folks don't feel that way, I think is important to me. The other question I had is with regard to the publicity, which I think is important. I think there were 3, Lee High School, Dartmouth Middle School, and then Andrew Hill High School.
Right.
Obviously, we're a big city, right? And those, I mean, I'm familiar with all those areas, and so those are not many, and so do we plan to put forward more concerted efforts to expand that?
Yeah, so that has been a challenge for us to actually get in contact with the school district. Each one of them operates independently as far as their digital boards. So we would love the council office's help in any of the contacts that we could have with the schools in your area. But that is something that we feel like will have a big impact, is
Yeah.
you get them, the message out to the school, the students before they go on break. We have seen that has helped.
And I think that's an inexpensive way to get the message out,
It
right?
is an inexpensive way, and on these specific high schools that were willing to, it is a little bit back and forth, but we supply all of the language and the graphics. So the school doesn't need to do anything except maybe work a little bit on sizing it on their digital boards, but we would love to have any district in your area involved with us.
And I think it's going to be impossible to get these on. I mean, it's going to take time to get this language on every marquee or school board around the city. But I would suggest that when you're conducting this outreach, that you prioritize the areas that we know have consistently gotten more calls for service, or residents or talking to us and telling you all where the hotspots are so you can target those schools in those areas. And the other thing, I feel like we've discussed this before, and I think it's imperative that the outreach and the communication with the schools start now, because
Yes.
obviously in July, they let out before that, and I think the conversation, trying to think back to last time, but it might have been that no one was there anymore because they were out for summer. So some of the conversations need to take place now in order to ensure that we have more of these up. I think it is important.
Yeah, and that was one of the directions on trying to give updates to the neighborhood commission as well, is for us to actually utilize that entity to help us get this type of work done and make key contacts. But I feel like once they do it once, then it's just a matter of putting it up again and a timing issue, right? So it may be a little bit of a heavy lift right at the beginning, but I feel like it's operationalized right after that. So
And I think the other thing that goes without saying is that around the city, there are some marquees or screens that can be utilized. The Southside Community Center has
Community
a very
centers.
prominent corner. To the extent that hasn't been done, I think we need to look at all those opportunities around the city where the city has direct access and easy access to some of those.
Great
I think
idea.
that's a good way to go.
Great.
The other question I had related to the report, it's on page 4 where it talks a little bit about the police department's work in Alviso. So it says, in addition to 6 officers and 1 sergeant from the on-duty street crimes unit were deployed to Alviso from noon to midnight, which I think this is sort of where I think we need to be going, right? So I appreciate seeing this. And that says that was done on July 4th. But then what goes on, it was interesting to me. No major incidents occurred and no arrests were made or citations issued. And so during that time frame, when the officers were in Alviso, I guess I had trouble thinking through the reason for not assigning any citations. I gotta imagine they saw something. And maybe, I mean, it's naive of me, but.
Hi, Councilman. Captain Mike Kim from the Police Department. So I spoke to the street crime team directly that were reporting up there. So what they told me is that while they're up there, they're looking for any major incidences from an officer safety standpoint, also if there's any fights or stabbings. Luckily, there were none. They definitely said fireworks were occurring, but part of the process in issuing a citation is you have to actually on-view the violation and identify that person. So what happened is there was definitely block parties going on up there, and a lot of times it would happen way down the street. They'd see the fireworks. By the time they get there, everybody scatters. When they said, hey, who just did it, they either got the middle finger or they said, figure it out. A lot of other times, the fireworks were actually blown off in the backyard. So a firework would go off in the backyard, they'd see it from a distance, they can go over there and they followed up on it, but part of the process is you have to be able to identify who that person is. They also said that as they were patrolling the neighborhood, the whole place was having different sorts of block parties. It would be unreasonable to break up a party if fireworks were going on. For example, in the backyard, they said there were regular families like you would see in any other part of San Jose, elderly people on lawn chairs, kids playing. And so the purpose they were there really was to try and keep the peace as much as possible. We had little to no calls for service up there, people actually calling 911, almost no complaints. And so, yeah, we were there definitely to keep the peace, and we were very fortunate nothing occurred and no injuries occurred.
Yeah, I guess as you're talking, some of the scenarios you were presenting, I mean, I can understand, right? It makes sense. Is there no ability for the police department to, even if we are not sure exactly who set off the fireworks, to know that it's associated with X house and cite the owner of the house?
No,
I mean,
so
there's no-
under the ordinance, we actually have to cite the person lighting the fireworks.
Can that be changed?
I'd have to defer to the city attorney's office because that's a muni code, but not to put you on the spot, but I don't, you'd have to change the entire muni code for that.
Okay.
And that's something we can look into.
Yeah, I mean, for example, where I live in a circle, and so there's two exits, 2 entries, and I know full well which house is responsible for the show that goes on at the end of my block. But I felt a little powerless. It's like, what do you do? It's going on all hours of the night, and so I don't know who's lighting it, but I certainly can tell you which house it's coming from. And so I think that's worth exploring. So let me just, touch on just my last few comments, but to touch on something you said is that there was no calls for service in Alviso. And this is something, I recently met with a bunch of, several advocates in my community. They're similar to some of the folks that showed up today that don't want to see the fireworks take place, right? Just this rampant sort of usage. I understand it, but as I expressed to them, and this is sort of to the audience, is that not everyone feels the same way. There's many people that like fireworks that are going to continue to do it, and I'm not sure we're ever going to be able to eradicate it. And so, I know since '84 we've essentially eradicated any usage of fireworks, but I'm feeling more and more, based on the conversations we're having, what I see on the street, conversations with my residents, what I hear here, is that just an outright ban doesn't work, because it's happening. And so I think we as a city need to rethink a strategy. And so, for example, there's the Rotary, there's the Almadane Lake, and I know the San Jose Giants do something. I think that's probably it, right?
That is correct.
And so-
Sanctioned fireworks, yep.
Exactly. And we try to direct people to go to those. But I've often thought, why not, and I've shared this with some of the folks that aren't supportive of fireworks, and it seemed to resonate a little with them, but why not explore a location in each district, like a big parking lot in which we tell folks, look, this is illegal, we know you're going to do it, but if you're going to do it in this parking lot from this time to this time. We can oversee it, we can manage it, and do it that way. So that way, somewhere close to their home, they can actually go use them there. And hopefully that would diminish the amount of usage in the immediate neighborhoods. And so I just really, and I know that's going to require a change of the ordinance, and that's a longer conversation, but I really do think that we need to start rethinking the way we do it. I like the approach, in Alviso and having a targeted sort of, I often hear the chief talk about, these different type of cars that he has out there. Well, how about a fireworks car? That if we were allowed each district to site to actually light fireworks, then for me, I think that would allow us and give us the ability to bring down the hammer on people with higher fines, being a little stricter as to what we allow, knowing that in each district you have a space where you can do it. And if you're doing it in your neighborhood, that's when maybe a pilot car can be brought on. I know it requires resources, but a pilot car can be brought on to patrol a particular area and come down very hard on folks in that area to tell them, look, we know you're going to do it. This is the place. Don't do it in your neighborhood. And so I just feel like we need to rethink this, and because I think what we're doing, even though it seems like we're making some progress and we're doing new things that we've never done, I think is good. I don't think we're getting where we need to get. Those are just my thoughts, and I just wanted to, if you have a comment or question.
Yes, Rachel Roberts, Deputy Director of Code Enforcement. I did just want to comment on PD's response regarding the citations for property owners. That is in fact true when it's a criminal citation, that you have to actually cite the individual that's setting off the fireworks. However, with the administrative citations that code enforcement issues, we are actually issuing it to the property owner where an observation has been made, photographic evidence that fireworks have been set from that location. So there is a potential, if an officer was able to document that and provide a report, they observed it coming from a residence, that we could potentially issue an administrative citation. But as he mentioned, you have to have, identify the actual person to issue a criminal. So that could be explored going forward.
I mean, something as simple as, as the officers are driving around, I don't know if it's having someone in code enforcement in the car, but them literally keeping a tally of all the addresses, coming back saying these are the addresses that we saw were clearly tied to the discharge of fireworks. These are the ones we recommend should receive the administrative citation. I don't know.
Yeah.
Those are
Yeah, we
just
can
my-
look into that.
Yeah, but I realize this, we're not going to solve it here, and I guess I have a question for the chair. Is this, are we going to do a cross-reference to the full council here, or do we just send this back and it comes back? I'm trying to,
We can.
yeah.
Sorry, I said we are not cross-referencing, but we can.
Yeah, okay, I'd be interested in
That's fine.
cross-referencing.
If you'd like to make a motion with that added, we'll take it.
So I'll make a motion to approve the report and cross-referencing it to the city council, where I think, the full city council, where I think some of these broader, more impactful conversations can take place, and hopefully give you guys some clearer direction.
Great. Motion and a second. I'm going to interject before I pass it over to Councilmember Arenas. So I'm curious, because this is the dialogue we were just having. How does our ordinance differ, say, for instance, from a social host ordinance like some other counties and cities have? And so I've looked up some of these and so on. I don't know, if staff is aware in regards to, I'm curious if you have an answer to that.
Yes, there is a property owner responsibility provision here. And so it is clear that it's unlawful and it's a public nuisance if any property owner or tenant allows or permits the sale, use, or discharge of fireworks on their property where they know that discharge is going on, or they should have known. So it's a matter of being able to write up the appropriate proof to be able to show that.
Okay, I am reading the Pacifica one, for instance. It sounds like maybe the biggest difference I'm seeing is that in Pacifica, the person doesn't have to likely have known that the fireworks were being discharged. They sort of just have to have hosted a party, right, that they were happening at. But other than that, I'm not necessarily seeing much difference. Now, I haven't, dove deep into look at to actually see, like, do they enforce this or administer it differently than we do? That could be one element that maybe is slightly different that we may want to explore, which I'll make that recommendation and maybe a couple others. And being that we'll cross-reference this to the council, I can save some of those for there, but I'll talk about that momentarily. I'll pass it over to Councilmember Arenas for now.
Thank you, Chair. So my district borders, the southern part of my district borders, Councilmember Jimenez's district, and so I get to experience a little bit. I think we have similar experiences in that we are considered a little bit of the suburbs, right? It takes a while to get to that part of town. You don't go there unless you know somebody or there's a reason for you to go out there. Or you can set up fireworks, because police are usually in the center, not out in the suburbs. And so a lot of my residents were having a lot of concerns, and next door was just full of comments. One of the concerns that they brought up was that they didn't feel safe enough to get close enough to take a picture. Now, we all know that one person that's on our block, we don't know their address, right? Because we don't go around memorizing people's addresses, but we typically know who that person is. And that person typically is not the person that, is usually maybe creating some trouble all year round. And maybe residents don't feel safe approaching that house because of all of the year-round activity, much less during the fireworks. And so I'm interested in exploring, and I know that you offered a couple of other strategies on how to report more safely. I really like the video as part of the next steps, right? I'm also thinking about how can we make this portal accessible all year round? Because it could be that the same folks who are doing this on 4th of July are doing it on whatever holiday. You pick the holiday and they do it. And that maybe there's more opportunities for our residents to take clear pictures, or I don't know, they have a camera and now they've captured on camera something, right? But no, they don't have access to this portal. And we can prevent some of these folks from repeatedly doing this all year round and not just focus on 4th of July. So I was hoping that maybe we could, and I know we focus on other, like New Year's Eve and a couple of other occasions, but I'm just hoping that if we have this accessibility all year round, that we have more opportunity for our residents to step up and take those pictures or get that recording from their camera, register with the police department and do their part, right? Hopefully leading into when the biggest holiday comes around, less of these types of incidents. Would you comment about the accessibility of the portal or the way that they can access it? I think they only are able to report incidents a certain time frame, correct?
Yeah, so with all 3 reporting periods, it comes to about 3 months.
Right.
So we start, first part of December through probably mid-February, so catch New Year's and Lunar New Year. And then we do June 1st through July 8th about for the 4th of July. So total, it's about 3 months it's online out of the 12 months of the year.
I'm guessing lack of resources is the reason why we don't have it all
Yeah.
year round.
So even though it shows, 92 to 97% of not enough information, all of those reports are looked at by code enforcement. So it's not like you can just keep going. You have to look through to see if there's any information that could harness, us to do a warning or a citation. If they don't have photographic evidence and they have a physical address, and someone saw that, then we could actually issue a warning. So for us, we have the capability to actually have the reporting tool all year round as far as technology is concerned, but there is resources as far as reviewing it and then following up and then making sure that we issue the citation. But also if they don't pay the citation, we're also looking at, finance and fees and stuff that go on top of that. So it's a lot of tracking and follow-up on it. So, and that's what the
Right.
community is really asking us,
Right.
is to increase our follow-up. So if we're doing it all year round, there would be just impact to staff. I don't know what that would be, but there would be.
Right. And I hear the 3-month mark, and I think that's already creating a lot of work for you. I just think that there's other holidays that could be included to comprehensively address this, right? And I'll leave that for the council to decide once we have this cross-referenced, and we can talk about the resources, and maybe at that point, you could also talk about what it is that you need in order to make this work all year round. So I'm going to move on from that point over to electronic billboards. I really liked them. I saw the Andrew Hill. That's not my area, but I drive by when I go to Costco. I didn't see it at Silver Creek High School, and I heard from the discussion with the council member before me that it's because it's probably the relationship you have and lack of relationship, and so I'm willing to absolutely lead my office to explore additional electronic signs or billboards or whatever we have out there, so please count me in on that. The other question I had, and I think I had brought this up previous to this meeting, is the online school newsletter format. So we don't get, as parents, we don't receive anymore, those a handy dandy, you put it on the refrigerator and it keeps you in line. Now we have to search for it in our inbox, email inbox, and so, which keeps it really neat, and it provides access for a lot of parents whenever they need it. Were you able to use any of the online platforms for any of the schools across our city to get the news out?
So we did last year, and I think there was like 52,000 that were emailed out. This year, we weren't able to make contact and them to actually incorporate it into their distribution. The other thing is last year it went out after the students had already left for school. So the feedback from the school is just maybe try to get that in earlier. And it's just coordination, so it's a timing issue.
We still get the emails, but.
Right, just people
But they can
applicability,
reinforce it by
yeah.
having it.
Right.
Sometimes they feel strong enough and then they actually print it on paper and send it home, right? If it's important enough, but we still get the information. I just didn't catch it this year, and you're telling me that you had to do it last year. I think for some of the things that might, especially for parents, I'll tell you that I've got 2 little ones. Well, not so little. Mine is, my oldest is 10, my little one is 4. And when we have fireworks out there, they shake, like a rattle. It's scary. My 10-year-old's fascinated, but my 4-year-old is just shaking in her boots. And people don't realize that it's not that great of an experience when fireworks are that close to children, right? It's scary. And then, you know, when we had dogs, same thing. Our dogs would just run amok, and they were bulldogs, so they could create a lot of damage on your property, right? So I think for parents, it's a really good target. I'm not saying that leave anybody out, but parents, we tend to be protective of our children, and I think very much like other parents, our children probably get very afraid of fireworks being that close. Like, we like seeing them Disneyland far away fireworks, but not like right next to you and you feel the thunder of the discharge. So, once again, I offer my office, please let us know. We can facilitate connection with our respective school districts. The last, and this was discussed before, but I just want to mention that, and you said you were going to have an overlay with what you don't call hotspots, but it's the high number of calls for service, and with the efforts that you're making, right? So that you're having you're getting a bang for your buck.
Yeah, so we haven't done that work, but
You haven't done that. I
There's an
get it.
opportunity to do that.
Yes.
So we get a true hotspot as opposed to
Right.
just a
Bless
call
you.
for service.
Yes, that's exactly my point with some of these, like the electronic billboards. Are we targeting some of those areas where we get the higher calls for service, or is it relationship-based? You share that it is relationship-based, but I would be interested in also having that, all of the outreach efforts match where, of course, there's some general outreach efforts, and then the ones that you make a little more effort because you know there's a higher calls for service. So for all of those efforts to line up so that, you know, there's not very many folks in your team and you need to make the most of it. Thank you for continuing to do the work that you're doing. I think it's so difficult to catch somebody, right? We know where it's coming from, we just don't know where, you know, how to do this. I hopefully, what we can do on the dais is change a little bit of policy to make it easier for some of the citations to happen. Also for residents, when they step up, for those efforts to also be more productive in terms of a citation for them, for whoever they're reporting. But I look forward to that conversation because I think it might make sense now to look at our ordinance and make some changes there. Thank you.
Just quickly.
Yeah, Councilmember Carrasco.
Yeah, thank you, just quickly. First of all, thank you, because I can only imagine that on this given day, I think there's a lot of activity leading up to it, whether it's TET or 4th of July. But on that particular night, especially in my neighborhood, it feels a little bit like a war zone. We've actually, I'll confess, we've actually climbed up on the rooftop, and it's going off all over my neighborhood. As you know, I represent the east side of San Jose. So I'm just curious, because I haven't seen it, and I don't know if you asked, I went into the back, and there's no audio back there. From all of the data, did you report as to whether this is just across the city, or is it in particular areas more specifically? Would you say just it's rampant?
I can answer that question. So, based on calls for service, it's actually across the city. So I
Yeah.
have a heat map that or a pin map that our crime analysis produced. And I don't know if you could see it, but it's basically the entire city. You
It is
can
the
look- you can
entire,
look at
it
it.
is the entire city?
Yeah. And so that's covering
Oh,
from
okay.
June 1st to July 4th.
I'm sorry?
That's covering the reporting period, June 1st to July 4th. And as you can see, it's pretty much the majority of the entire city.
Yeah. So it's just, it's not. That is a lot.
And the one
Activity
area in
going
particular
on.
I was talking about earlier in El Viso, that entire, we call that District Robert or District R, everything north of Berryessa Flea Market going to El Viso, we only had a total of 7 calls for service that day. Compared to if you look at other parts of the city, we were a lot more higher, especially in the Southern Division. So Although visually it looked like a lot in El Viso, it was actually one of the least amount of calls
Oh,
for
is that
service.
right? Mm-hmm.
So I think that's part of the issue, is that it's a community, why, it's supported by the entire community. And so we did have police officers up there to prevent any major incidents, which it worked. We had actually a lot of residents say thank you for being up here. But it's one of those things that's gonna be hard to enforce.
It's funny because I actually thought, because of course, I think we all think that because we're all sitting in our own district, right? Probably all sitting on our rooftop, We're like, it's just happening in mine.
No, that's a fire hazard.
And, yeah, right. And so we're all thinking it's just in our district, and we're seeing all the smoke and all of it going off everywhere around us. And and we're under just the impression that it's heavily, I'm under the impression it is heavily in District 5. And just from this map, it is everywhere. It's happening everywhere. So
Yes.
it is a difficult thing to control.
And like I said, I'm not sure if I said it last year, but anecdotally, I spoke to the patrol captains on July 4th and asked them directly. I said, what'd you guys think? And they said, whether you're in the Blossom Hill area or all the way by Westmont High School on the other side of San Jose, or you're in Central or East San Jose, it looked very similar.
It looks-
So no one particular area. They all had block parties. They actually said most of the residents were very cooperative. People with their lawn chairs having barbecues. It was just a big, giant celebration. Our staffing is always limited on 4th of July. We did ask for volunteers to come in for extra staffing, and we couldn't get any but 2. And I asked, again, the patrol division, and they said, we want to celebrate 4th of July ourselves. So a lot of them went out, to the lakes or camping. And so it's just tough. So we were at our minimum staffing, and so our priority was the calls for service.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much,
That's a
Captain.
very-
So I have a couple questions. I want to thank you for the presentation, the report today, our community members for coming out, expressing the frustrations that are there. I think there's a lot of realities that have been sort of brought up and mentioned today. I think the biggest one is sort of the overwhelming social acceptance of fireworks, whether legal or clearly in our city, illegal use of them, that happens. And that's clear, right? As you see the night sky light up in and around these holidays like New Year's Eve, Lunar New Year, and the 4th of July. And to your point of Alviso, with the sheer number of fireworks and the known loud, or the known displays that happen out there, and the few calls for service that come in, it has just become socially acceptable out there in that community, where there's more people in that community participating in the use of fireworks than there are that are upset that they're actually being used. And I might say there may be even more people there that don't know that it's actually illegal to use them in San Jose. And so that's a guess. So, but I mean, the sheer number of individuals and shows that happen out there, and the amount of reporting is certainly a signal of how difficult this is, because we're not just talking about enforcing something that may be illegal in our city. It's something that's become socially acceptable throughout our city. And we see that, in a number of other things that, become norm that we try to then enforce after the fact, as they become custom. And I know that that's why it's not the first mention, Councilmember Jimenez. I know that Councilmember Rocha for years was advocating that we just make fireworks, some form of them legal throughout the city in some form or fashion, to try and hone in or narrow in on how we might address this better, to then sort of play to what you're saying. If you make it legal in one sense, then can you enforce, the illegal uses in others? I personally don't think that will help. I think that it would just, exacerbate it. We would see still the illegal usage, and then we would see people going to whatever areas we deemed, to do so legally. We see that we have 2 shows, a few more shows. We have like the San Jose Giants do it and stuff, but the community run, the downtown fireworks, Rotary fireworks, and Almaden Valley at Almaden Lake. I do think it's worthwhile to consider something, in Alviso to try and, pull together a community there rather than have the sheer number of illegal usage and see if there's, similar to what Councilmember Camus did in Almaden Valley, to have a fireworks show. But again, I still also think that, it's a good thought, but I think you're still going to have the illegal usage, unfortunately. And so I don't want to miss the slight growth, or the slight positive, right, steps in growth that we had. It's certainly nothing to rave about, right, and pretend that we're making a huge difference here. The 5% change, we're going in the right direction, but it's slow, very slow. And when you consider the slow start that we've already had, where we were issuing citations the first year, felt kind of good, and then had to pull all those back, right? And then now this year, we're maybe hoping, we can get some more citations issued, and yet we still have the 92% of reports that were not complete enough for us to do so, and we end up with 7 sufficient, right, for citation out of a total of 1,946 online reports, right? It's just, anybody, I feel the same way the community does. Anybody looking at those numbers is going to go, well, that's not working, right? No matter what business you're running, if those are your results, you're going to say, well, okay, something's not working here. And I think that, I don't want to stop our progress, even albeit slow. I don't want to stop the online reporting. I don't want to just do away with it. We fought so hard, right, to make this an opportunity in our city. I don't want to give up on it after, a couple of years. I want to make it successful, and I think that there's 2 reasons behind it. I also, right, would want to make the enforcement successful, but I'll touch on that in a little bit. The challenge we have is it's very difficult to make the enforcement successful with the priorities that we're having, and as you pointed out, Captain, 2 people wanting to sign up to do extra enforcement on 4th of July. We don't have the bodies. I'm looking at Pacifica, and I'll read off some of this language in a little bit as well. Pacifica is 12 square miles and has 40,000 population, right? It's less than half of what my district is, right? Much easier to put in an ordinance like this and enforce it on a smaller scale like that, a smaller square footage, smaller city, and to get a handful of officers out, right, to do so. We're sitting on 180 square miles, right, with the thinnest staffed police department of any big city in the entire country. So it's, no surprise that that's the case, hence why we said, well, what else can we do, right? And that's where this reporting tool was developed, because we thought if we can augment and help our law enforcement and code enforcement, right, if we could do so from the community standpoint that has a lot more eyes and ears out there through an online reporting tool, maybe we can make a dent and get some more citations out there. But 7, right, doesn't feel good. Doesn't feel like it's working well. So I think we need to see how we can beef that up, right? How do we actually get to more citations? And I don't know if it's just working within our current ordinance. And so that's where I'll just read off a little bit of what I read from the City of Pacifica that they passed just 2 years ago. It states, officers do not need to prove the social host knew of the illegal fireworks discharge, opposite of what ours says, but must be able to testify that the firework came from a certain property. So all you need is the location, the property, right? It says the ordinance also pertains to any person who hosts, organizes, supervises, officiates, conducts, or accepts responsibility for a gathering on public or private property. And so, we have some shows that happen in supermarket parking lots and stuff, right? There's a number of, I think, opportunities with an ordinance language that becomes expanded from what ours is today, that I am obviously more than willing to try, because if we're getting 7 citations out of our current ordinance and language, I don't know, how much more we can, maybe we get down another 5% on that 92%, of the reporters not giving us sufficient information. If we keep it the same way, maybe we're continuing to chip away. Or maybe we shift the language around a little bit. We open it up a little bit more legally. Sounds like it's legal because it's not just Pacifica. There's a number of other cities that have similar open social host ordinances. And God forbid, right, we see if that number changes by another 10 or 15% because we've shifted the ordinance. So I would be very interested in that, and I will ask if that recommendation to explore the social host ordinance and maybe changing up, expanding our ordinance a little bit could be added into the motion, and then we could discuss that further if staff can kind of be prepared to just discuss that further at the council.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I accept. I mean, the reason for the cross-reference was I was hoping a broader, more in-depth conversation regarding the ordinance and stuff. So yeah, totally.
Is that okay with the seconder?
Yes.
Great, thank you. So we can just discuss that more further, and staff can come back at the council meeting to let us know what's the proper process that we may want to go with that. And then I don't know if we have an idea yet, but I wanted to provide it to the community members that are here, if we have an idea of what agenda date this may come back to. I'll let you chew on that for a second. Sure, go ahead.
Now that you're adding a little bit of direction on that motion, I also wanted to add what I mentioned before in terms of bringing forward, what is it going to take to keep this portal open a little bit longer throughout the year? Maybe all year round, or maybe some of the other higher, where we see higher incidents happening throughout the year. So if we could add that to the motion,
Yeah, that's fine.
wonderful. I'm the second, so I accept.
So you're fine with it? Okay.
Chair.
You have a date?
So normally, the cross-reference would be for the September 10th council meeting. We were just looking at that date, and there was a lot of items on that date, so I'd like to leave it to the Rules Committee. We can cross-reference it to that date as a normal course of action, and then have the Rules Committee decide if it's balanced on that agenda or if it needs to be moved to something else.
Yeah, I'm okay with that, but, well, I guess one of us up here sits on the Rules Committee, but what I don't want to see it get kicked to like mid-next year. Or something.
Yeah, cross-references from the committees would be in short order. It'd be, if it got kicked a week or two off of the September 10th would be,
Yeah,
I
that's
think,
fine.
the worst scenario.
Okay, yeah, that sounds fine.
But I think it'll be subject to the review of that agenda, because I think, because the previous week's a holiday, I think it's kind of busy on that one. But let's just do it as a normal course of action, then the Rules Committee can decide, and that would just be the normal protocol.
Yeah, that sounds fine.
Okay, so just to make that clear then, so we're going to cross-reference this to the September 2nd.
No, 10th.
I'm sorry, 10th, excuse me. Yeah, 2nd is a holiday. The September 10th council meeting, we will know definitively by the 28th or the 4th
I-
rules meeting?
I think it's the 28th.
The 28th. So we will know definitively by the end of this month, August 28th at rules, if indeed it will be heard at the September 10th. And to just make it a little easier, my constituents could just connect with my office to kind of figure out if it happens on the 10th or not, if it gets moved. Okay, and then a couple other items. So I had a number of questions too, and didn't get everybody that wanted to maybe be present today, so I'm kind of filtering some questions through. So I'll just begin. So are we monitoring the permitted fireworks shows, so the permitted ones, so in and around those, to ensure no illegal activities occurring sort of around them, right, parking lots and whatnot, so in conjunction with those?
We are, and we've also issued citations. So if you look on the Tet and Lunar New Year, those, we actually had the Grand Century Plaza for the first time actually apply for a permit. So we're there pre-launch, as a fire inspector goes out there, and then also during the show, we're actually out there again. We did have folks operate outside of their permit, and then when we got the information, we issued citations to the property owner in that case.
Thank you. You've already answered, and we've put it into the motion on exploring a social host ordinance. And I know that you said that the developer of our reporting tool is no longer with the city. I'm curious, and the community member was curious, in deciding this, and I believe the answer was yes, if I can recall correctly. Did we explore other apps or reporting tools used by other cities or towns before we created our own?
So I wasn't here with the city when the platform was agreed upon, but I do know that 4Alert and NAIL'Em, which are two prominent applications that many cities use out there actually are for immediate response. So our whole model has been for not immediate response because of resource availability. So that's why we ended up going with building our own platform. So, and it also gives us a little bit more flexibility. So we have language, needs of our community. So this allows us to actually have additional languages that some of these other applications, they would probably be extra charge or not even available in multiple languages. But it also gives us the ability, we've added acknowledgements. So we do actually have people acknowledge whether they understand that they could be subject to testifying in the appeal process, and that they understand that there is not an immediate response. So before you actually submit the information, you have to check those acknowledgements. So it gives us a lot of flexibility to design the app the way our community needs it. Whereas these other ones, it's just canned and you take what it is, but it is immediate response only.
Okay. And then another question was, how can we best use some of these actual firework-related injuries or incidents to help promote the tool? I know that we used an imagery just of a general person with a hand injury, but the question was, how do we actually use a real incident, to actually help promote the illegal use or to promote our tool itself?
So I would have to defer to the communications office. I think there's schools of thought on using imagery like that with our community. So you have some people that support using the imagery, some others you don't. Also, we have schools that actually did not adopt some of our language because they weren't comfortable with that. So the images, they were very specific. You'll see that Andrew P. Hill, they actually diverted a little bit of their wording on the lower digital board because they're not comfortable with some of the images that were general in nature. So I think we have a lot of different audiences that we are trying to harness and cultural sensitivities. So I think those are things that we took consideration when we developed our campaign. And so that was something that came out.
Understood. And I think that, it speaks to some of the opportunities, not just with other schools or people that have signs, but I'll tag a plug for something that the city is working on, which hopefully we can get there sometime soon. It's been in the works for over 4 years now, is an opportunity with electronic billboards and electronic signs here in the downtown that we would be able to actually manage, right? So we could produce the content for those rather than be subject to what the owner of another billboard is saying, what they want to see on there or not. That's in the works, but I would echo what my colleague said, which is, how do we partner better and get even more of these electronic signs, in use throughout the city? And I don't know, did we consider Avaya or SAP as well?
We did not because of the cost that is associated with that. So with the schools, there was no cost, and we spent some of our funding for the freeway display at the it's the mall. I can't remember the mall name off of 280 or 880. No. Yeah, Valley Fair. So we had
Valley
some
Fair.
of that displayed, but we actually used some funding, communications funding for that.
Did you not grow up around here?
I did not. So
Okay,
I'm only
it's
here
totally-
2 years. This is my
totally
whole
known,
second year.
Like,
Sorry
what's
about
that mall, Valley
Yeah.
Fair? If you grew up around here, you spent a lot of time.
Yeah.
So another question would be, so this is for yourself, Captain Kim. The police department's protocol, when you actually do get a 911, not from the reporting tool, what is the protocol on these, if you can give us an idea of, is this just going to beat info for the most part, or is it, what would be that standard protocol?
So I spoke to our communications division to verify some things. So on a regular non-4th of July, non-Tet Festival, or New Year's, if someone calls report fireworks somewhere in the neighborhood, they would create a call for it. And if they cannot identify where it's coming from, and they're just saying, hey, it's occurring on this street, they do create a call, and it's sent out to the district officers on their MDC, broadcasted as beat information, and if someone's available, they'll go. On the, if they can't identify the house and they're saying, I know John Smith, I'm just using that as an example, is doing fireworks, then they will create the call, and then they'll dispatch a police officer based on the priority. So is it occurring now? Did it just occur? When did it occur? And then also the availability of officers. For 4th of July and New Year's, Vietnamese, Chinese New Year and Tet Festival, they actually have a protocol in place. And so it's in their manual. So on those particular days, if a call involves a noise or an event similar to I just described, they will create the 415 fireworks call or disturbance fireworks call, and it is broadcasted for information. If the call involves the sale of fireworks and the RP is able, or the reporting party is able to provide information, it's actually referred to the fire department, and so they can follow up on it specifically. And then if they say it's a firework occurring and the RP does not want to be contacted and they can't really identify the area, then they'll do what I said earlier. They'll create a call, beat information for someone to come out. So they actually have a protocol in place.
Would you know the statistics of what the percentage of them that end up as beat info? My guess would be it'd be rather high.
I don't have the information.
You don't have that
Yeah,
information?
no.
So I'm gonna guess here, and maybe you can, head nod from just experience in regards to, right? I mean, I would guess you're looking at a lot of, just like our reporting tool, right? People calling in and sort of not enough information. If it's not enough for us to cite the reporting tool, it's probably not enough for an officer to go out there and do enforcement action. So we're probably getting a lot of these that end up just being reported, and that's about it. So
Yes, yeah, that would be my assumption.
Another question is, what role does actually, so maybe an on-view for fire or police, or even, code enforcement now, community service officers, what role are they playing in sort of on-viewing some of these and actually getting enforcement action out there?
So the community service officers are not dispatched to this type of call. It's not in their protocol. If they see something or hear something, they can drive through the area. We encourage that as a visible deterrent, but they're not allowed to take enforcement. They can notify the dispatcher of it, and if an available unit is in the area, if they think they know where it's come from, they can, an officer, if available, will drive through. But typically, if an officer does respond to this type of call and he sees the incident, he can cite. We've had incidences where they actually go to the area and they see the group of people out in front of the house. They didn't see it or hear it, but someone called in. They'll actually make contact with them and just say, hey, just so you guys know, and they'll give them a warning. Basically, hey, we got some calls that a firework was going off here, but they definitely can't cite or arrest anybody. We did have one incident on 4th of July where an officer was driving down the street in downtown and actually saw a person light off a large tube of fireworks, and that was our one citation because he actually saw it. It was just by mere coincidence. He drove around the corner, goes off, and the person never ran. So he put on his lights, he stopped, and the guy stayed there and was able to issue the citation.
Okay. Yeah, I do see maybe some opportunity, at least with a little more on view, if we allow this social host, right, versus actually seeing the individual light it, but being able to tie it to a residence or an individual that's responsible for the party. You had mentioned a number of hotspots, and you answered Councilmember Jimenez's question in regards to calls for services, how we're identifying them. And so that's how we know where these hotspots are. Is this information that is shareable? I guess you're saying it's for 2 or more, so it seems like it's, I don't know how good that is to actually claim if it's a hotspot or not. But is that something that's shareable information, or like the document you showed?
So obviously, I could share it with you, Councilman, and I can get that information after the meeting. As far as the general public, they would have to do a Public Records Act, because
Okay.
basically we're going to generate and create a document that we created. So
Okay.
the calls that we put on here is the call itself. So we recorded every single call. If it came in as a 415 fireworks or an explosion call, the map that I just showed you, actually I had made for us, was every single call during that period. And then what they did was they just created like a heat, like a heat map. It's like a shading. And so then that kind of coincides with the area. So I can show you what I mean. But a heat map is just a cluster of calls, right, in that particular area. So that's what I just showed you right now.
Okay.
And so that information we share with the patrol officers and let them know if they're available to go through. So instead, we just told every single police officer, we actually put it out department-wide that's working that day to drive through your districts and be visible the entire time. That was our direction. So we actually said, go out the entire time. If you're available, just drive through the neighborhoods.
Do you think there may be I mean, I know we're seeing it all over the city, but do you think there may be a way to more efficiently utilize that same tactic, which is, hey, go out and be visible, but rather than say the entire, your entire district or your entire beat, we sort of narrow down some of these hot spots rather than just 2 calls or more in a certain area, and it could be through community feedback as well, that we have specific areas that we ask for this. Now, I know, like, for instance, Alviso has always been up there, and that's why we have a number of officers. It sounds like there's a different problem in Alviso, again, which goes back to not many people in Alviso personally care. There's way more people that participate. So maybe that's not the spot, right? Like, maybe it's the area, right, where we are getting more of the calls, there are more of the people, and we try to identify those zones. Is that something that we can work on for next year to try and maybe utilize some of this hotspot information more efficiently?
I can take it back to the chief, of course, for
Okay.
consideration.
Thank you. And then maybe, if possible, you can see if there's an answer, some response to that when we come back to the full council. So,
Sure.
thanks. And then did we issue any citations from locations or people that were given a warning last year? Sort of, and I know that we specifically made the warning effective for longer than 12 months. I think it was 13 months? 18 months, 18 months. So did anybody that had a warning from last year get a citation this year or no?
No.
No. So all new
Yes.
individuals? Okay. All right, I think that is it for today. We will be coming back, as we stated, on either September 10th, and before we go, y'all,
Yeah,
Councilmember Jimenez?
yeah, I just have a few short questions. So the first one is, I was hoping someone can share if we have any numbers on, as to how many fires have been started by fireworks, due to fireworks?
So this last 4th of July, there was
Yeah, just over the last year. Just trying to
15.
get us, 15?
So this last 4th of July reporting period, there was 15.
15
7 of
fires.
those were vegetation fires, and 8 were just trash in a trash can, or very small fireworks that were still on fire that were extinguished fairly quickly. So 15 total. But the breakdown was 7 vegetation, 8 kind of trash, with small fireworks was able to be put out with. quick
Is
one.
that compared to maybe a year ago? Is it?
So
is that-
last year was 14.
Okay. And I apologize if
That's
it's in
okay.
the, I just, okay. Okay, the other question I had was, there was mention of an event that was, I guess, I'll use the word sanctioned, in District 7, I think in the.
So
the di-
Grand Century Plaza.
Yeah, I was gonna say where the Dynasty Restaurant is,
Yep.
but yes, the Grand Century Plaza. And so that event was, they filed proper permits, and they were then able to start sort of.
So fire department actually did reach out, so we contacted 150 or so businesses prior to Tet and Lunar New Year, so we did that in December of last year, to try to get, understanding of the ordinance, what the fines were and so forth, and we actually made some progress, because one of our biggest issues in that area were Grand Century Plaza. They actually came, got a prior technician, got a sanctioned event, and had dedicated personnel. We also had a fire inspection go for a pre-launch to kind of survey, and then during the show, unfortunately, they had other people still on private property do fireworks outside of the sanctioned show. So that's why we issued multiple citations for that activity. Even though it wasn't them, it was on their property, we were able to identify it. Some members of the community let us know, had pictures, and we followed up with a citation.
Okay, and is that the first time that plaza has pulled permits and did everything?
That's correct.
Okay, prior to that, like last year?
0. They still have the activity, but no sanctioned event, no pyrotechnician there, no
Okay.
fire inspector on site.
And is there any sense as to, like, I personally don't think that the calls for service is the best way to track hotspots, but is there a sense as to, prior to them being sanctioned and allowed to do it, and I'm sure they publicized it maybe more openly this time, I imagine, as opposed to other times when they weren't doing all the things they needed to do, did we notice a decrease in the calls for service? Now, this time around, is there a way to?
We didn't
Yeah.
track that as far
Okay.
as fire. I'm not sure
Yeah, I
if
just-
PD saw it
yeah,
in that
so-
same district.
I just look at all you, I assume the right person will answer the question.
Yeah. Let me take a look.
Yeah,
I think-
I'd just be curious, sort of going back to the original sort of comment I made, that, if in every district, for example, if there was a sanctioned event and we encourage that and sort of send people there, I'm wondering if the calls for service would decrease. That would be my hope, right, is that people would go there instead of doing it in their neighborhood.
Perhaps when we do the mapping and, merge the online reporting with PD, we can also maybe put like notation on the map where those sanctioned events were.
Yeah.
See if there's any
See if there's
correlation.
any
Yeah,
correlation.
okay. So thank you for that. And so currently in the code, I was looking it up as I was sitting here, and so currently it essentially says it's illegal to use, sell, or, all these things it says, unless you're essentially permitted to do so, right?
That's correct.
So for example, the Almaden Lake, I imagine, I don't know, is that Councilmember Camus's office actually being the one sanctioned and permitted to do so?
That
Or
is
does he
correct.
hire someone to actually do it?
So I believe the office actually is the one that pulls the permit, but they probably work with the pyrotechnician and all of the coordination that has to happen.
So there wouldn't be, I guess per the way the code is now, we couldn't, for example, District 2 couldn't pull the permits and then say, okay, we're going to have this space where you can come and use the fireworks. We would need to have the pyrotechnicians and everything in place, right?
Yeah, permitted, safe, because we're
Okay.
ensuring safety, right? So
Right.
we have the personnel there, fire prevention inspector on site.
Okay. Yeah, so what I envision is if let's just say it would happen in which every district had that, we would have those people in place, essentially standing by, but it would be the residents doing what they do in this particular location to sort of,
So it's not really the residents that are lighting the fireworks off. It's a
no, I'm aware of
Yeah.
that, but in my scenario, I'm thinking it would be a place where John and Joe can go light their firework, while some of these experts and safety personnel are standing essentially on the sideline, watching to make sure everything's done appropriately.
Yeah, I think we would still need to maybe, work with the legal office and just make sure that, an individual private citizen can still light those in a cordon, boxed off area, and just see if everything is, lined up, or if what would need to be changed in the ordinance to allow something.
Right, and I'm trying to, what I'm doing is just
Yeah.
feeling out as to what would be allowed per the current state of the ordinance, and if something like that, as I described it, would be permissible, if it would be stretching the intent of the ordinance.
Yeah, I think we'd have to look at
Okay.
that, because right now, I think it's sanctioned if you're permitted.
Right.
If you're permitted, there's particular
Requirements.
regulations and requirements that you have to go through.
Okay.
So if you were to have a non-permitted but sanctioned event, we would need to revise the code to contemplate what does that look like.
Okay, all right.
And
Okay.
and just as the social host liability ordinances, it does impose strict liability, so that if fireworks go off, then the social host is liable. But there are defenses. So if you're an owner of a property and you've rented it out to somebody else, you're not liable. If you don't know, if you could show that you weren't present, then you're not liable. Or if you didn't have any prior knowledge, then you're not liable. So while it's written differently than the know or should have known standard, in the end, it might come out to be pretty much the same.
I'm not a lawyer, but I think different. So based on just what you're reading off, but I'll steal the floor back after.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, but even the threat of that and having them go through that process hopefully would prevent people from
Yes,
doing
it's a
certain things.
policy decision, but it's in view of fairness, it's not strict. If you have a defense, you still can come up with your defense. You're not strictly liable even if you have a defense.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you, yeah. I did have two more items, and I think we can, I'm glad you're already looking into it, because I think we can kind of discuss this too at the council meeting, but I'm not necessarily concerned about the few occasions where somebody has a good defense. Hey, I wasn't there, whatever it might be. Most of these parties are done by people that somebody is there, it's their house, right? It's their family that's over. We're gonna find the situation that our ordinance, the way that I understand it, we couldn't cite that person at the house if they weren't the one outside lighting the firework. The social host would allow us to, Joe is in the house, and maybe we could still cite them even if it was somebody else outside lighting the firework, if they knowingly threw this party, so.
So, Councilmember, as long as we can we have evidence that it's occurring on the property, we can hold the property owner accountable under the current ordinance. The property owner doesn't have to actually be present or photographed, it just, there needs to be people on that property, because the responsibility is that
What I
they're,
understood what you had said earlier was that they have to knowingly have been aware that the fireworks, some language around that, I'm not reading it right now off of, but that they had to be aware or should have known, or should have been aware that that the fireworks were gonna be used. And that's where I think it's slightly different from our ordinance, from what I'm reading in the social host ordinance, that they don't have to be aware that fireworks, or should have been aware fireworks were being used, they only have to be aware that they're throwing or hosting a party, and that's it. And so that's what I'm reading in the social host.
okay.
So again, not a lawyer, but I think if we look at it close enough, I'm saying, I think our language is slightly different, and we can change it, and it could make it a little bit more broad. The last couple of things, I actually liked the next steps, but down in the enforcement, you talked about the police department using sting operations to target the sale of fireworks. I appreciate that, and I think obviously community members would appreciate that as well. It doesn't talk about next steps where we would actually try to, how are we gonna increase more just field enforcement, right? And actually get the enforcement the day of. You talked about only 2 officers wanting to sign up. I think that needs to still be in the next step, even if, we're not seeing much progress there. And so I'd like to discuss that maybe further at the council meeting, how and what the chief's thoughts might be, right, in regards to as we rebuild the police department and what we're doing, and we're adding more numbers. There's a lot of units, like the streets crime unit, right, that has just come back, and we clearly utilized them this past year. But how do we continue to beef up, right, these areas that we know have gone neglected? And so I would want to keep that as a next step, even if it's not necessarily next year, but it's in our future. And then I just heard at the end there, it sounds like you are going to do the data overlay of the police reporting, and then the tool, what we see on the tool, because you said, Ryan, that has not been done yet.
So it hasn't been done.
But we are gonna do that, or no?
We need to figure out how we can get that done.
Okay, so I
If
thought
that's
it
a
sounded
desire
like
that you
right now
guys
that
wanna
you
do.
could do that, so, but you're not planning to? Can we plan to?
I need resources and just how that.
Can you let
is
us know
gonna
when we
look
come
and-
back to council
right.
what that would take?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Motion passes. Thank you very much. Thank you all for the conversation, and we'll see you again. Now we're on to item D2, our fourth quarter financial reports for fiscal year 2018, 2019. And thank you for being willing to go second and allowing that item to go first. I know we moved around the agenda a little bit today. I hope you enjoyed our conversation on fireworks.
Yes. Well, I was actually in City Hall watching, and I could see them all over town.
So you attest to,
What were you doing on 4th of July at the office?
No, because we could see the fireworks downtown.
Yeah.
And watch them from the 13th floor.
Pleasure.
So, yeah.
Like, was that work?
not work.
No, I wasn't working. I wasn't working. I was enjoying the fireworks.
How long?
Okay, so today we have the fourth quarter, are you going to pull up the reports? We have the fourth quarter reports, and usually we just have the investment report, but since it's the end of the fiscal year, we thought it'd be a good opportunity for you to kind of see how it rounded out for the debt program, and you have a comprehensive annual debt report that comes to you later this fall, so that will be fairly quick. And then we have the investment report and then the revenue management report. So it should be loading,
Great.
loading up. Okay,
And please don't mind, I'm going to eat my lunch.
okay, that's fine.
And we do have a quorum, who's listening from the back. So he's
Is
not
it-
gone.
Okay, so if you open, oh, here, let's see, is it right? Here we go. Okay, so with me today, I have Rick Bruno, Deputy Director for Revenue Management, Chin-Yu Sun, our Principal Investment Officer, and Joe Gray, our Debt Administrator. So, let's see. See, I'm challenged, because usually I have somebody else do this for me. Control. Okay, there we go. So first, we'll start with the debt management report, so we'll have Joe do that.
All right, the first slide just shows the outstanding debt issued. It's part of the city's portfolio, it's the entire portfolio. As of the end of last fiscal year, it was $4.6 billion, and we issued $609 million. So that includes multifamily housing, the conduit debt section. This is the debt profile in even more detail, excluding multifamily housing revenue bonds. As of the end of the fiscal year, it was $3.8 billion, and that's the breakout by relative size and percentage of the total, and also the dollar amount. Key activities for debt issuance and debt management that occurred during just the fourth quarter. We had commercial paper note issuance for flood improvements in June of $3.8 million. We issued commercial paper for the airport for their terminal expansion project. Clean Energy entered into some standby letter of credit for 4 power providers, and of course, we got ready and did a lot of pre-issuance work for the issuance of the 2019 GO bonds that included new money and also refunding. And this is the breakdown. So this is at the time of the report, debt issuance items for the balance of the calendar year. Obviously, we issued and reported to you the GO issue, the 2019 GO issue in July of 2019, provided new money for Measure T, also new money from prior authorization that was still remaining but not issued under the prior Measure O for libraries and for public safety. And then in aggregate, we issued refunding bonds to take out the outstanding GO bonds at the time from all the prior bond authorizations. Slated for this year, you'll see this coming before the council calendar, the multifamily housing revenue bonds, and those are the projects that are listed there. This is a 10-year historical representation of the tax-exempt market index, and of course, the majority of our bonds are issued on a tax-exempt, but also fixed income, fixed interest rate basis, and it shows the average of 3.64, and currently, as the date of this report of July 18th of 2.99%, so rates are dropping. And this is the commensurate, but this is only for 1 year for the variable taxable and tax-exempt rates. Tax-exempt governed by SIFMA for now, and then also taxable LIBOR, and it shows the spread between the 1-month LIBOR and the SIFMA for the past 12-month period. The last slide here in debt shows that our credit ratings are still strong. So the GO credit rating is 1 notch below AAA, which is AA plus, and then lease revenue bonds are, of course, 1 notch below that at AA. Our GO bonds are still rated higher than the state of California. The city's airport bonds are basically AA2, AA1, and then the Sarah senior tax bonds, senior tax allocation bonds, are rated AA, and the subordinate tax allocation bonds are AA minus. And that's it. Continue.
Thank you, Joe. The city's investment policy conforms to the California Government Code Section 53,600. The city is authorized to invest only in high-grade fixed income securities. The long-term debt need to be rated A or higher. Short-term debt need to be rated at least A1, P1, F1. The city's investment policy is reviewed annually and shall be adopted by resolution of the city council. And the city's investment program is audited semi-annually for compliance purposes. The city's investment objectives are safety, liquidity, and yield in that order. The quarterly investment reports are posted online and placed on PISFIS committee agenda and separately agendized for the city council's acceptance. As of June 30, 2019, the city's portfolio exceeded 2 billion mark, reached just shy of $2.1 billion. The earned interest yield was 2.348%, about 6 basis points higher than the previous quarter. Weighted average maturity was 661 days at the end of the fiscal year. The fiscal year to date net interest earning was over $35.5 million, which comparing the previous year was an increase of over $12 million, and it's about a 52% increase from the previous fiscal year. There was no exception to the city's investment policy during this quarter. The city's portfolio was invested about 39% in agencies and treasuries, 10% in supranationals, and 48% in credit sectors, which include CDs, CPs, credit, corporate credits, and municipal credits. The city also opened its investment to mortgage-backed securities after the city council updated the mortgage-backed security policy guidelines. So we were able to invest about 1% in mortgage-backed security as of the end of this fiscal year. This is a chart of a city's investment fund by the investment portfolio by fund balances. The red section is general fund, which is amounted to $411 million, about 20% of the total portfolio at the end of the fiscal year. The general fund balance usually increased by approximately $151 million during this quarter, mostly due to the receipt of a property tax in June. We projected we will have enough investment maturities and revenue to cover anticipated expenditures for the next 6 months. This shows the trend of a change of fund balance in the portfolio over the last 24 months period. The red line in the chart shows general fund, the change of general fund balance. In the past few years, there are usually a very obvious peak for general fund at the June to July, the interchange. That's mostly due to the city's policy to pre-fund the retirement pre-funding. And in this fiscal year, we're not going to see that because city decided not to provide any retirement contribution. With that, we expected the general fund balance to decline gradually throughout the fiscal year. And the city compares with its portfolio's performance with LAIF and the Bank of America A or better 1 to 3 year corporate government security index. As we all know, the treasury yield has been inverted for a while, meaning the short-term bonds are paying at a higher rate than the longer-term bond. During the last 14 months or so, LAIF, which was a much shorter portfolio, has outperformed the city's portfolio. In recent months, we've seen the gap between the LAIF and the city portfolio to narrow, and we expect the trend to continue to narrow, and the city will eventually pull over of LAIF. On the flip side, the Bank of America index is converging with the city portfolio in yield. This yield at the end of June 30 is just about a half a basis point higher in the city. With that in mind, thinking ahead, the city will continue to match the investment maturities with known expenditures within the next 24 months horizon. We may extend a portion of the portfolio beyond 2-year term when appropriate to provide some income and structure for the portfolio. We'll definitely maintain the diversification of the portfolio, and then, as always, the safety, liquidity, yield is our mandate, and we'll focus on that.
Okay, I'm going to cover the revenue management program. So this slide covers the high level of our revenue collection efforts. So we're focused on reducing delinquent accounts receivable, enhancing revenue compliance through 4 primary collection programs. First, the accounts receivable team. This is primarily our collectors. They send letters, make phone calls, make the determination in terms of assigning accounts to collection agencies, represent the city in small claims court, and also refer accounts to the city attorney's office. Our business tax team is responsible for customer service and collection of the city's business tax. And then our compliance and monitoring team, they do regular audits and monitoring of various revenues, covering utility users taxes, lodging taxes, sales taxes, and a number of other taxes. And then finally, our utility billing team, we're the billing agent for the Environmental Services Department, billing the storm, sewer, community water, and garbage accounts. So this slide was included for contextual purposes. This is essentially the portfolio that revenue management is involved in and responsible for overseeing. It's about $1 billion, primarily made up of the utility billing. We also do sales tax audits. Our miscellaneous billing is another large piece where we have a billing system where a number of departments can issue invoices, and our team is responsible for receiving payment and also follow-up collection efforts. Business tax, lodging, utility tax are round out the rest of the portfolio. On this slide, this is also a contextual slide. This shows the 5-year history of invoicing and payments through our business tax system and our miscellaneous accounts receivable system. So you can see over the past 5 years, we've increased the dollar amount of invoicing and payments and collections in those two systems from about $100 million up to $180 million. The red line across the top shows the percentage of collected, so we can see that we're stable and we're maintaining a high percentage of payments across those two systems and the invoices that are billed through them. So this chart shows the outstanding receivables over a 2-year history. So the gray fill is the delinquent accounts receivable. So these are accounts that have not been paid for 90 days or more. And on top of that, there's the blue, which is the current receivable, so they would be less than 90 days. As you can see, the red line there is the delinquency percentage change, so that's from a quarter to quarter, and that's pinned to the right axis. So you could see over the past year, we've had a really stable receivable balance, and the delinquency balance is really the area that our team is focused on collecting, and that has been relatively flat for the past year. On the next slide, we have a breakout of the delinquency receivables. This is obviously the area that we're focused on and we're trying to reduce and collect and maintain at a reasonable level. In total, there's just under $50 million of accounts receivable across our programs. 34 of that is in the delinquent category. And as of the end of June, you can see that the breakout of accounts, majority of the high dollar accounts are kept in-house for our collectors to work, and that represents $15 million. We have about $10 million assigned to third-party collection agencies, and then there's another bunch that are tied up in legal bankruptcy and other sorts there. And finally, this chart represents the collections and return on investment of our collection staff. We have a target to reach 5.5 return on investment. So that's $5.5 for every dollar that we spend on collectors and their time that they spend collecting. As you can see, over the past 2 years, we've met that target, and for the fiscal year ended in June, we had a rate of 6.3. So with that, I will turn it back over to Julia.
Okay, so the recommendation is to accept our fourth quarter reports for debt, investment, and revenue management, and then refer the report to the council meeting, and as Jennifer said, it might be different than September 10th for full adoption. So with that, we're available to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Questions from my colleagues? Councilmember Jimenez?
I'll move to approve the report and cross-reference it to the full council. And I did have one question.
We have a motion and a second here.
The question was, I think on the second to last slide, the collection and return on investment, I just see the, actually following the red line, the actual ROI. But I was curious about the 4.3, that dip, is that, I'm not sure if I'm understanding it correctly, but it seems like that was a little below the goal, and so I'm curious as to
Yeah.
what happened.
It's really, our collection efforts are long-term, right? You will have some cases that go on for years. We try to collect them sooner than that. We also have different collection techniques, some which require us to lien properties, and those can go longer term. In terms of our other areas like revenue compliance and monitoring, we will do audits and we'll generate assessment letters. And in those cases, they could be longer term. So there's really, it's not as stable. You know, as you can see, the quarter prior to that, we had a large audit finding and it resulted in a 9 return on investment. So it's really kind of fluid, but we kind of look at it on an annual basis. If we're hitting the 5.5, that's our goal.
Good, good. Okay, thank you. And just one other question. It's a broader question, so I don't know if Julie may want to answer this, but, or someone. So I realize that sometimes there's state actions or items that are coming before the voters that have the potential to impact our general fund revenue. What comes to mind is the Prop 13 reform that's been talked about for some time. That may come before the voters at some point. I know there's been some estimates as to how much more revenue it's going to bring into cities and such. And so what I'm curious about is, does the finance department, I don't know if it's a little premature to even, if you find that a little premature and you don't often look out to the horizon to see what may be coming, or if that's more a function of the budget office?
Yeah,
or-
it is more a function of the budget office, but we do provide support to the budget office with historical information that we may have, you know, especially around other taxes like sales tax and things like that. But we do work in a partnership when we look at that type of legislation and provide information to the city manager's legislative office.
In assuming that we all, or assuming that many people agree that it is going to bring in revenue, is there anything that ever, again, this may be for you, Julie, but is there ever anything that's sort of emanates out of the budget office or from finance to say, hey, this is something that we see as potentially good for the city? Maybe you want to take a position on it?
I think Jennifer, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that comes through the legislative process in terms of supporting legislation or ballot measures. And in that staff report that would come forward from the legislative office, we, along with the budget office, would provide any support with respect to the revenue impact to the city.
Okay, all right, very good. And I apologize, I was looking at you, Colin and Julie.
That's okay, people do it all the time.
My mind was over here, but it was.
That's okay.
So I
We get
apologize,
it.
Jennifer. But, okay, so thank you for the information. I think it's important to follow, because there's things, you know, coming down the pipeline, I think we need
Yeah,
to be aware.
and we work very closely with budget and Benna in the legislative office on those types of issues.
Okay, all right, wonderful, thank you.
Councilmember Arenas?
Thank you. I have a kind of a general question. I know we've have been waiting for like this dark fiscal cloud to come over us soon, and we've seen like in the last month, the market just going crazy. How would you anticipate preparing, or how do you prepare, how does the city prepare either for like a, you know, this course correction that may happen, or just for this
I mean,
volatility?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of that comes out of the budget office and their,
Yeah.
you know, their 5-year forecasting
I
and
figured
things like
with
that.
this last question.
Yeah, exactly. So, but in terms of the way that we support that in the areas that we have, in terms of like the investment program, we do projections out with respect to what we think interest earnings will be, you know, and as Chin, you pointed out, this last year, we generated $35 million in interest earnings across all the various funds. So that becomes part of the forecasting process. And then also, you know, Rick and his team, you know, wanting to be aggressive in that delinquent revenue collection efforts and keep, you know, revenue flowing to the city that way. So, so we do provide input into the budget office in their forecasting process.
In this last year, when we did the 5-year forecast, when the staff did that, in February, we always do a pessimistic, an optimistic scenario for the 5 years. We usually go off of our base
Right.
case, but this year we did an extra, like, recessionary case to see what that possibility would be. But yes, we're constantly, the staff's constantly monitoring the economy, and you'll see, the performance through the bi-monthly financial reports that do come to this committee, and those are jointly prepared with the finance department. So they work very well and closely together and have for years to make sure that there's kind of a check and balance on how we're looking at things.
So even in our 5-year forecast, you're taking an extra pessimistic approach.
We
and
did this
kind of
last time.
Building in for worst-case scenario.
Yeah, we decided to go beyond a pessimistic, just to see
Yeah.
what that range of numbers could look like potentially. I mean, that was not our recommendation to plan a budget that way, but we at least wanted to give you that information
Yeah,
that if, things went south, I was, the budget director when things were south for, over that 10-year period, a lot of my time, and it does drop very quickly, it can, the revenues. So we do need to have them monitoring the investments, the cash, and having the budget office also looking at the numbers. And so we try to provide a check and balance to each other, and it is good that we are separated to do that.
Thank you.
Is it?
Yes, that was it.
Yeah, thank you as well. I'll go a little backwards. This last slide, the one before that, page 26, did you mention an average of 6.2, you said, or something like that? Was that, I didn't see it on the chart here.
It's not in the chart, but it is in the memo that for the fiscal year
Just
18,
the average,
19,
right?
the average of the
Okay.
last 4 would be 6.3.
Oh, 6.3 you mentioned, okay, great. And good work on, obviously, a lot of money coming through those delinquent collections. Going to page 23 on the invoicing and payments, what has made that shot up so much? Is it the change in our tax structure, business tax, or is that just better business, more business happening, or what is, this 5 years it's gone up on payments, right? So.
Yeah, so there's 2 things that are driving this. One is the business tax, as we reported.
And when did that go
just-
into play, if you can remind me?
I'm sorry?
When did that trigger? When did that happen?
That is fiscal year 17, 18
17.
would have been the effect.
Oh, that's the effect. It's that, I thought it was the year before. So, all right, so
Yeah.
that would explain.
Yeah,
That
it was
was-
approved by the voters in November
Okay,
of
so that explains the last
16,
big
went into
shift.
effect July 1, 2017.
Okay, so that's the last big one. Still looks like it was trending upward. So let's take out 17, 18.
Mhm.
What causes that trend upward?
So in addition to that, we had implemented a new accounts receivable system, which a lot of departments are starting to utilize more for their invoicing. So it's just more of like a shift from their proprietary billing systems into revenue management's billing system. And so it's not necessarily an increase of $100 million that the city recognized in that, but it's a $100 million increase in what's flowing through our system and our applications during that time frame.
Okay, but this latest jump, 17, 18, was the,
That
so we
was the
shouldn't
business
expect to
tax.
see that again. It should now be either steady growth or
Yeah.
closer to that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's helpful. You can go back to page 15. You mentioned a little shift in the general fund here, and that sounded like we're not pre-funding the retirement accounts? That's
Correct.
what's, why?
Correct.
Remind me?
We had gone through a financial analysis, so based on the interest, based on the discount rate that the retirement system was providing us and the amount that we are earning in our portfolio,
Oh,
it
didn't
really
make
wasn't
financial
becoming
sense.
financially viable anymore
Is
for
that
the
gonna be the
city.
case moving forward?
And the borrowing, we had to borrow money as well. in
To
the
do so.
borrowing
Is that
costs.
gonna be the case
That-
moving forward, we
That's
think?
our plan moving forward, is not to pre-fund.
And it was removed from the forecast, and
Okay.
it was discussed in that document as well.
Okay. Okay, good to know. And then on the slide before 14, I see mortgage-backed security as a list. I thought I heard wage-backed security, or did I just hear it wrong?
Mortgage-backed security.
Mortgage-backed security. Okay, I saw mortgage-backed security, and I thought, is that what we were talking about? So, okay, never mind. And then on page 11, page 9 does a good job of kind of, in my mind at least, describing a little bit at the bottom with some footnotes of just some, so I have no idea what a A1, P1, F1, for this short-term rating is. If there's a footnote we can put on some of these that might help as well, you know, so I don't want to say the footnotes on page 9 are perfect and help me totally understand, but a little better, right? Talks about Moody's, and I'm assuming Moody is a program or some sort of platform,
Oh,
something
yeah,
that
there's-
helps manage, right?
Yeah,
the
there's three,
S&P 500, it's
yeah,
all-
there's 3 rating agencies. So
Rating
Moody's-
agency,
Yeah,
there you go.
and so
So-
Moody's is one of them. But we will.
So the footnotes there were slightly helpful.
Yeah, and we'll
On
do
this
that.
one, totally lost, so
Okay.
a little bit of
We'll
help.
give context of where that is in the rating categories.
That's why we have you guys doing this and not us. I think that was it. Yeah, that was
Okay.
it. So we have a motion and a second. If there's no more comments or questions, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion passes. Thank you very much. All right, we'll now move on to item D3, our Office of Emergency Management Work Plan Priorities Annual Report.
I'll leave you to find out where yours is.
Welcome, Ray.
Oh, he did. Oh, he went, I thought I talked to him. He said he'd get back.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Committee Chair, committee members, staff, members of the public attending today. I am Ray Reardon, the Director of the Office of Emergency Management, and I'm here today to present accomplishments made in last fiscal year's efforts and priorities in emergency management, and identify the priorities for this next fiscal year. In the effort of time and consolidation, I'll present the Evelyn Wood Dynamics version, so speed reading if you're used to that, for those who remember those old times. As you may be aware, the emergency management preparedness is one of the city's managers' enterprise priorities, in the Office of Emergency Management works with an emergency management work group to accomplish all the priorities set for each year and the accomplishments made. And our focus is to implement emergency management, homeland security, and continuity services for the city of San Jose in coordination with our partner agencies. Our recommendation is to accept this annual report at the end, and while we do this presentation and the review of the memo that you received, by the end you should have an understanding of the mission of the Office of Emergency Management, understand that emergency management is a team sport and requires the involvement of all the departments. Recognize the significant work accomplished this last year and understand our priorities established for 2019-20. Since 1951, this slide's a little different than what's in your packet, but it's just a reversal of the last 2 items because it wasn't in the order of the memo. Since 51, the mission of the office has been to manage public safety programs that are intended to protect the residents and businesses from the impacts of a large-scale emergency or disaster, which includes 13 natural hazards. Think all the earthquakes, fires, and other conditions. 11 technological emergencies, which include things like the power shutdown that we may experience this summer. The terrorism threats that we still seek, that are still sought in this community, both intentional and unintentional. Following the Coyote Creek flood, we had an after-action report that identified a significant number of things where the city was lacking in terms of response and preparedness and response, and preparedness, training, and response. While we had that report, we also have to maintain our capabilities according to the federal core capabilities assessments, which were done every odd year, 15, 17. One is to be completed this fall of 2019. And we'll present the updates to that assessment when we have the City Council study session on December 13th that's scheduled this year. We've shown progression in all areas according to the core capabilities as well as to the after-action report. The allocated resources, we're thankful, have been increasing in the Office of Emergency Management. For example, we are now currently at 12 full-time staff. We were not there in 2016 and 2017. We've added 2 more additional UASI positions we'll be hiring this year for the rest of this fiscal year, which will bring the total staffing to the Office of Emergency Management to 14. Our non-personnel budget is currently at $1.5 million, consists of ongoing funding of $175,000, as well as one-time funding of $1.3 million to catch us up on the emergency planning efforts that I'll be talking about today. On August 18, 2017, the City Council accepted the Emergency Management Roadmap of 6 categories. They've evolved over time based on the conditions and the priorities as they've been changing. As I go through these 6 components of the roadmap, the red indicates that the project has not yet started, and it progresses up to green when it is done. Please note that we've progressed from the impact of the floods. Some of the roadmap categories have changed. This numbering system, 1 to 6, does not denote a priority. It's just a way of organizing the numbers. And as I go through the roadmap, I will not go through all the accomplishments. I'll just highlight some key ones in each one of the categories. For example, in strengthening emergency management organization, the number 1 item on this list was to deal with the disaster service worker volunteer program. So the highest accomplishment in this category was the reactivation of the Emergency Services Council, because they were required by state law to evoke the training and programs necessary for the CERT program, which we did get off the ground. This shows the progression from 2018 to 2019, showing that some of these items are moving to the done category. In the Improve All Hazards Emergency Planning area, in these 12 items related to all hazards planning, the city saw progress in all areas. A key item that was accomplished was the updates to the Joint Emergency Action Plan, because on February 13th of this year, we did have to activate that plan and issued an evacuation order based on the information gathered in that Joint Emergency Action Plan. We were able to provide 20,000 contacts using our alert system and putting the information out in English, Spanish, and Vietnamese. So this shows the progress again, so many of the items turning to green. One item that's not in the schedule, that was not in the list of priorities that I do want to point out, is that we now, as of May, when we were notified from PG&E that they anticipate doing public safety power shutoffs, the city immediately shifted gears and spent a tremendous amount of assets and resources into developing a power vulnerability plan. What typically would take 9 to 12 months, we've been able to accomplish in about 10 weeks because of the reshifting of all the resources to that effort. In the area of the enhanced key emergency management capabilities, we had a number of items in the priority list, and out of the 6 noted items, we've activated the Emergency Operations Center this year 7 times, and we actually were able to send staff to the city of Paradise after their disaster that they had. Those are all key contributions, and again, you'll see the progression of things closer to being done. In the Promote Resilience and Recovery, of the 6 established priorities, progress was made in all items, but particularly looking at our delivery of public education materials, both written and verbally, in multiple languages this year, and also conducting our Train the Trainer, seeking out multilingual instructors for the course. So again, the progression would look more like this at this point, moving toward the areas of done. In the next area, increased coordination, this is an ongoing item. This is something that never really stops. It's an effort that we have to keep going, working with our outside partner agencies, the county, American Red Cross, Cadre, other organizations. So while there was progress, it still shows yellow because it's an ongoing, progressive effort that takes place for increasing coordination. In the areas of implementing innovation and readiness measures, this is the last item on this roadmap, and I'll talk about the priorities of this coming year. In this area, we are starting to look at feasibility studies for the location of the new Emergency Operations Center based on the Measure T funds. And the key items there is that we did look at several facilities, and after looking at the needs and demands of the designs around building a facility that's earthquake resistant at a 1.5 standard, so it's a 50% greater standard, the resolution is looking like the best fit at this time is the Police South substation on the 3rd floor. That's the direction we're headed. We still have to evaluate other conditions that are going on as to whether that'll be the settled place or not. So we will continue evaluating that as the needs of the police department are also evaluated. And this is the progress toward, as you see again, the movement toward green. What we want to do this year is move to more specific or more clearly identified objectives in looking at how we want to approach the emergency services. So we've whittled it down from 6 categories down to 4, really addressing key objectives here. The first key objective is that the city has a plan to tackle any emergency. The second objective is that employees, citizens, businesses are ready to take action and be able to answer a call to action. The third item is our community trusts the city to let them know when an emergency is coming, and the public provides vital information back to the city. And the fourth would be to integrate and continue optimizing technology in our program. You'll see that yellow shows up in the next slides, and that's because there's some work being done on those items already. We're moving toward the completion of the power vulnerability plan. But we still, in this category, we have 10 top priorities, and the power vulnerability plan will be the most important, followed by the other 9 plans that we have to update, or they've never been created for the city, so we're trying to create these plans of support for the city. In the call to employees, citizens, and businesses ready to take action, or we're referring to it as call to action, the top item for us is to continue to insert trainings and deliver them in multiple languages, including Spanish and Vietnamese, and to continue delivering the services to those affected by the flood with the grant funds that we received from the state of California. The next objective is to that our community trusts the city to let them know when an emergency is coming, and the public provides vital information. The term we're using here is building community trust. In this category, we want to complete our communications plan, respond to emergencies, and provide timely information. Hopefully, we won't have these emergencies, but we want to be ready for the emergencies. We also want to continue to support community events and provide multilingual public education materials and delivery of the information. And the last item of our objectives, the fourth item, is our emergency response is optimized through technology. And a key here is obviously our design and looking into the upgrades into a new emergency operations center. Obviously, that'll take a few years. We don't anticipate it being done within this fiscal year, but that would be on track, and that we have the ability to implement our new GIS system into the emergency operations center. With that, the way it stacks up is there's a lot of stuff to do. The priorities are pretty well identified. We presented these to our emergency management work group at the beginning of June and the beginning of August here. They've all concurred with it, and we're ready to, and we have been starting progress in many of these areas. Our goal is to integrate resilience into all the emergency management activities, including our objectives and key results. And we'll continue to report updates and our accomplishments each year at the PISVIZ committee. And that concludes the report. I'm ready for any questions.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Questions from my colleague? Sure. Councilmember Jimenez? And
I was gonna ask anything, but I didn't feel like I was being
Councilmember
pressured
Arenas is just in the back, so I'm summoning her to come back.
I know, Ray, you and I haven't talked about this. I'm trying to recall exactly who I talked to about this. It might have been the city manager or maybe even the police chief, but the movement of potentially location of the center, emergency operations center at the south substation, I think is a good thing. So I'm totally supportive of it. I think it's wonderful. Do you happen to know, though, if it's going to require the exodus of the police academy in order to make room for you all?
I know that, I don't know all the details. I know the training center and the academy, that's where they do need to move in order for the EOC to be
Okay.
located there.
All right. Okay. Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Arenas, any questions? If
Oh, I do have a question.
yes.
I apologize, it's super cold, so I had to go to the chambers and get my, okay, so I know that, but when we were out, we had an emergency out, and I'm gonna talk about that Eborn
Oh,
fire.
The fire, yes.
Right. It was the first time, I think, after the floods, at least in our district, to have kind of a fire that actually required evacuation from our residents, correct? And I know we, unfortunately, I was out of the country, but my staff, I believe met with you, and nobody was hurt. Every damage was pretty minimal. But I think we saw, for the very first time, some gaps in the emergency plan. And one was identifying how these notices go out to our residents and how they get pinged, even though, well, based on the cell towers and all that, right? But one of our concerns was that some of these notices were getting to our residents after everything was under control. So then, just kind of reigniting some concern in our residents. So I wonder, learning from that, how would you approach this emergency service plan gap?
So just as a little summary, the notification went out about 1 o'clock, about 1 o'clock, and it continued. The notice by default will go for 4 hours. And so we have already identified that we need to adjust that timing, because it's an automatic. Second component with that situation is that sometimes the propagation from a cell tower, when it sends out the message, it'll go further out than it's identified, simply because of, it can be everything from air temperature to weather to, night or day, and sometimes those conditions will send out the notice a little further. So those are the two things that we're trying to work on. The one we can't change propagation, but we can change the timing of the initial notice, and making sure the second notice is sent out as soon as we possibly can as well.
Yes, I believe Councilmember Carrasco received a notice, even though she's very far from.
And that's one of those
from when the fire
situations.
happened, and she was like, "What? Evacuate?"
Just happened to be because that cell tower sent
Right.
it out,
Just happened to
where it's
be,
located,
right.
where it's at, it would send it out a little further.
Yeah, a
than
little further
intended.
than what was needed. Yeah, and my other concern was that, say, for those folks who work off-site and, are away from that cell tower, won't get pinged, but they have somebody at home who may not respond to, and I'll use my home, for example, my mother-in-law, she won't, because English is not her first language, and she just not literate in English. That notice probably wouldn't really mean much to her. But for me, like if I had received it, although if I was on the other side of town, probably wouldn't receive it. I don't know how we can target residents based on address versus just vicinity.
The Alert SCC system has a line for putting your address in, so when we drew that polygon, you should have received, if you registered your address, it should have gone to your phone as well, even though you're not there. It did not? Then I'll check into that.
Well, in all fairness, I was in Mexico, and it was a very remote place, so
Yeah.
I might have not received it, but.
Let me check into that.
Yeah, okay. Because I know that we have in that community a lot of grandparents or a lot of, there's first, second generation, and those are the caregivers. That's what you see during the day out and about.
Yeah.
And they may not necessarily understand what it is that they need to do, but the owner of the home or whoever it is can alert them, can send a message home. So that was one of the things
Okay.
that I picked up from that, and I appreciate you acknowledging it. And I don't know how this works into this discussion about, technological advances and possibly using that state budget, that $2.5 million. I wonder if this could be that opportunity to use that money for this emergency plan gap.
For which gap? I'm sorry,
For this technological gap.
For this,
Yeah,
okay.
if you get
We can
with
look
the
into that.
resources at hand, I wonder if we can access and draw down, but if it sounds like it's doable, so.
It sounds like it's doable, and just some procedural items. And then secondly, the system actually is managed through the county. And so it's a different, we don't have immediate access to make modifications to it. But we do make recommendations based on operations and experiences that we've had.
When would those recommendations fold into the conversation? When will you connect with the county? How does that happen?
We meet with them regularly, so we have reviews after these incidents take place. We have phone calls, reviews and actions that take place. This was one of the items that we identified, and that was, so it's on the list of actions to update. And there's a constant revision. The system just went through revision now because it was bought out by another company. So the new version coming out, so we're seeing if that's going to take care of the items that are addressed here.
Got it. Somebody else taking care of that portal of the
Correct.
SEC?
That's through that's again through Santa Clara County manages the alert system.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you so much, and thank you for keeping our residents safe. And I know we're working through a lot of kinks here. We're learning, and fortunately, nobody got hurt.
Yeah.
And we'll learn. This is a lesson learned for future. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all.
Thank you as well. So is it true then, nothing is in the red now, as far as the color coding on
Yeah, there's
progress?
nothing that hasn't had some work started on it, just because there's a lot of movement from one year to the next in the plans as we're developing it, correct?
Okay. And then on the designing and building a new emergency operations center, is there a reason why we're still not coordinating with the relocation of our fire training center, or an opportunity to build something new? In addition to maybe a temporary move down to the substation, or no?
I'm not involved with the fire department side. I know I'm doing more with the police department because that was an identified site. So I can't answer that question, but we can get you information on it.
Okay. City manager? Is that?
I'm not sure there was space on where the fire training center, the space at the
Where we're looking to
central
relocate it? Uh-huh.
has the space for that, but certainly, I'm not as close to that, so we can certainly double check that.
How much space are you in need of that you're using at the substation there?
I don't have the exact numbers with me. It's around 22,000 square feet.
22,000 square feet?
That's off the top of my head without having the numbers with me.
What's the square footage you're occupying now? Small, right?
It's way too small.
Yeah,
It would fit in this section of
Yeah, it's small.
It's too small.
So you're looking at 22,000,
Yeah,
about 22,000 square feet at the new substation.
Yeah.
Okay, I just, was just curious. I know the substation is actually pretty sizable, so there's a good amount of room there, but I know we're gonna have to build
We're gonna have to.
a new building for the fire operations and training center, and so that was always an opportunity, and I think it should remain an opportunity. If indeed we think maybe it's just a floor or two of a new building, and we build up a floor or two for the emergency operations, emergency management. I don't know, I guess my concern is sort of the long-term stay of this, and that, I guess twofold. One, it's pretty far south, rather than central. Central Service Yard is absolutely central. Two would be just the other use that the police department we want to have. I know Councilmember Jimenez is very interested in the police department actually using that as a police substation, as it was supposed to be used. So that's it. I think that we should I think it's fine for a temporary move, but I would highly consider, or ask that staff highly consider, space within the new fire training center.
And we can we'll work with the Office of Economic Development, and we can provide you an update on the feasibility of that. So I'll ask them to do that.
Okay, thank you. Go for it. Councilmember Reyes.
So within your work plan priorities was to support some community events. And I forgot this in my earlier comments, as part of that Airborne fire, some of our residents wanted like a fire safety planning preparedness meeting. I'm hoping that we can make that happen for some of those folks who live on those hillsides.
Yeah, that'd be a perfect blend of having a fire prevention person there and doing emergency training too.
Awesome.
We can do something like that. We can organize that.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Sure.
I appreciate it.
Thank you. And Blair, I'm sorry, did you still have comments on this one? Yeah, please, come on up.
Hi, thank you. To try to speak today to three of the many issues that I feel can be relevant to talk about at this time. One is to remind yourselves and the community that Bay Wasi has ended the Alameda County-sponsored Urban Shield program, previous training and exercise, emergency medical, and community resilience programs will now all be going through a nonprofit agency preparedness agency called SF CARD. BAUASI will be trying to create a more open, communicative, sustainable, democratic process for the many sides of neighborhood and community emergency preparedness issues. SF CARD should have a day-to-day practicality that can respect and work with the ideas of individual everyday voices that want to help with neighborhood and community emergency preparedness needs. As Santa Clara County may have an important role in the future of emergency preparedness and medical training, I hope everyday people of San Jose will want to feel comfortable to refer to SF CARD, and it is good potential here in San Jose, and to work towards its good potential here in San Jose if they have any questions or problems. To quickly jump to my third idea, with the difficult December 4th City Council meeting last year, the City Department reorganizing after the flood of 2017, and the upcoming OES review by the DHS, I hope you are continuing to work on what can be better communication between all city government departments, and in fact what needs to be a better two-way conversation and communication with the everyday community. I hope this simple idea can be an important addition to the 2019 OES Community Trust ideas mentioned here today. I also hope OES and city government has been considering ways of perhaps a better set of checks and balances so the mayor can better share his authoritative power in emergency decision-making decisions, and possibly an authoritative power can then be returned to the mayor in a final decision-making process.
Thanks, Black. Did we get a motion on this? Oh, go for it.
Just one more note, on the Measure T bonds, there are two committees, there's an oversight committee and a working committee, and we have been coordinating with police and fire on all these issues, but we'll continue to take feedback as we move forward with a Measure T bond and the EOC developments.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't know if we had a motion yet.
Motion to approve.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion passes. Thank you very much. And we're on to our last report, item D4, the Form 700 Filings Audit Report.
Good afternoon, Joe Royce, City Auditor. We're here to present to you our audit of Form 700s. Despite high overall filing rates, the city can improve timeliness and completeness of filings. I'm joined here by Chris Bernado and Marisa Lynn from my office, as well as Tony Tabor from the city clerk's office, and Lee from the city manager's office is in the audience. So the Political Reform Act of 1974 was passed to introduce greater transparency in government. It requires many public officials, employees, and some consultants disclose certain personal financial interests on a statement of economic interests, also known as Form 700. The Form 700 will disclose ownership of stocks, real estate, or outside employment. The purpose of the form is to support transparency and accountability in state and local governments. The Fair Political Practices Commission, or the FPPC, is the regulatory body for these financial disclosures, and the city clerk's office is responsible for collecting the city's filings. The clerk's office relies on staff in individual departments, also known as department liaisons, to identify Form 700 filers and ensure they are correctly entered into the city's Form 700 e-filing system, or SouthTech is the name of the provider. Filers must file a Form 700 each year, as well as upon assuming and leaving their positions. The City of San Jose requires that some of these individuals also file a separate family gift report for 2018, there were about 2,400 Form 700 filings due from employees, elected officials, board and commission members, and consultants. The objective of our audit was to review the filing status for the city's Form 700 filers. This is a follow-up to prior audits in the same subject area. Our first finding is that most Form 700s were filed as required, but the city can improve the timeliness of filings. The city has been successful in getting most employee and board and commission filers to submit their Form 700s with a 95% filing rate for 2018. However, the city can improve the timeliness of leaving office and assuming office filings and the accurate identification of filers. As the charts in the slide show, although overall filing rates were high, there were a significant number that were filed late. For example, just 52% of board and commission members leaving office filings were timely. This was often because filers were not identified and notified timely. To address this, we have recommendations for the city clerk to streamline the process for updating filer information, hosting regular meetings with department liaisons, and providing updated procedures with consistent expectations for liaisons. City Clerk's office can further encourage higher filing rates by establishing procedures surrounding the assessment of late fines and referrals to the FPPC for non-filers. Also, since some filers were not indicated as needing to file both Form 700 and a family gift report, though both are required, we recommend the City Clerk's office regularly reconcile the rosters of the two types of filers. Our second finding is that the city can improve processes for ensuring consultants file required Form 700s. The city faces challenges in getting consultants to file Form 700s with filing rates below that of employees and board and commission filers. The filing rate for all consultant filings was 83%, with leaving office filings under 50%. Similar to employee and board and commission filings, timeliness was an issue here as well. Only 14% of consultant leaving office filings were filed timely. Overall, there is a lack of consensus across departments on how to enforce consultant Form 700 compliance. In 2018, the city potentially paid over $1 million to 3 consulting firms with outstanding Form 700s. We recommend that the administration clarify guidelines for the Form 700 compliance process as it develops citywide guidelines on contract management, which is an outstanding audit recommendation from a previous audit. Moreover, to make it easier for the city to notify consultants of their obligation to file, the city should update its contract templates to provide fields for consultant business emails and should separately collect alternative personal email addresses for consultants for follow-up when they leave their office. Our last recommendation is that there could be better guidance to ensure Form 700s are complete and reviewed for potential conflicts. In addition to improving filing and timeliness rates, the city can take steps to promote the accuracy and completeness of Form 700s, as well as proactively reviewing filings for potential conflicts of interest. While the e-filing portal has some resources available, several filers have nonetheless expressed that they still find the process confusing. To address these questions from filers, the City Clerk's office can improve access to detailed filing instructions from the FPPC, as well as to the FPP's advice page. Finally, by establishing procedures for reviewing filings for completeness and guidance on identifying potential conflicts of interest, the city can help ensure that adequate information is available to the public and that potential conflicts of interest are addressed. So our report includes 9 recommendations to improve timeliness and completeness of Form 700s and family gift reporting. We'd like to thank the City Clerk's office, the City Manager's office, the City Attorney's office, Human Resources, and the IT Department for their time and insight. The City Clerk's office and the administration have reviewed the report, and their responses include in the yellow pages. We ask that you accept the report along with the recommendations and cross-reference to the September 10th City Council meeting. We're happy to answer any questions. I'll now turn it over to Tony Tabor for the City Clerk's response. Thank you.
In the interest of time, you've been here a really long time, and it's freezing in here. I'm like shivering. We're happy with the audit. We have 95% compliance with employees. Employees are easy to get a hold of, easy to track down. The consultants is an issue, and I like having it kind of written down because we've been debating in our office, what's the best way to do it? The leaving office is difficult. Once they're off a contract, they are like, well, I'm done. I don't even work on that contract anymore. So it is a huge problem. I've talked with other city clerks in other cities, and most of them are like, we just kind of ignore the consultant part because it's difficult. So we've been working with the city manager's office on a contract training that we're holding in either September or October. We're kind of making it bigger and bigger as we talk. So we may need to push it into October to like, what is the best way to get those consultants to file? We need to get their email addresses. I do have a new staff person assigned to it. She is tracking down people at their new jobs and like using Google, finding them, tracking them down, saying, you used to work for this company, now you need to file. Like, I know, she's a dog with a bone. She's not letting that go. So we're working hard on that consultant piece because I think it is important. It's part of the contract. So, and I'm here for questions.
Thank you. Question, I'll ask first. So, sorry, I'm tired of sitting down. So, and plus these are nice mics, look at that. So, I'm curious, why don't we tie it to the contract?
It is, they are tied to the contract. So there's a sheet in the
So
contract
why do
that
they get
lists.
paid then before they file?
Not my department.
Whose department? Who's
That's
ever is in
the
charge of that
finance
consultant?
department. They're-
So the agreements are monitored by project managers or staff throughout the city. And we had issued an audit of consulting agreements back in 2013 and found variability and inconsistency in how contracts are managed broadly across the city. And that's why we, that audit recommendation, and Lee can speak to this, kind of the progress on that. Our recommendation is kind of feed this into that because this is another piece of that puzzle of the contract management with consultants of, it's inconsistent throughout the city. So we talked with some contract managers who said, absolutely, if they haven't filed, we're not going to pay them. In other cases, they weren't quite even aware that that was one of the standard clauses in the agreements. So it's a citywide issue that just needs to be kind of cleaned up with some consistent guidelines.
And all these project managers are city employees, correct?
As far as I know, yes.
Okay. Lee?
I want
Tony,
to add
go
one
for it.
other thing. That's why when you look at the numbers, assuming office is much higher, because they want to get paid. The leaving office, they've already been paid. It's
Yep.
over. So that's why the leaving office is a lot more difficult.
Okay. Did you have something you
Yeah,
want to
that
add?
is correct. So, as we continue to bring on new employees and other ones cycle out, Joe's absolutely right. How, one department does contract management can slightly vary over another, especially as we're able to recruit employees from other cities. They do it a little bit differently. So as Tony mentioned, that kind of the streamlining of the contract management approach, as well as, the individual, how they manage a contract, that training kind of reinvesting back in them so they kind of understand and some of those check boxes and what their responsibility is will help that out. But again, it is something that a project manager needs to do because a lot of these companies are not too familiar with this. So it's kind of our job to go ahead and remind them of that.
Okay. Yeah, I look for that. It sounds like that's obviously an area where we need to do a little bit better. So, questions, comments from my colleagues? Seeing none, can we get a motion? And this is being cross-referenced to the 10th.
Motion to approve.
Motion and a second
Cross reference to council.
on the 10th. Yes, that's in the agenda item. So we'll go with that. Thank you very much. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. We have Blair. You get to take us away. Inspire us, Blair.
I might be a little strong, but thank you. I wanted to thank I have a cautious optimism for the SF card process, and, I hope people of San Jose will want to trust it and work with it. Individual people can work with it and maybe doing something interesting, and then I hope there can be good communication, to say again, we're developing better community communication with community, between government and community. And, today I think this is about all I'm going to say. And just to repeat what I spoke about for emergency services, I like being able to work on good practices, and it's nice to be back to work on those good practices. So to learn how to take it easy, I'll just say that today. And good luck in the efforts. Ray mentioned that he wants to work on that too, and it's nice to hear him talk about it. And for the idea that how to better develop that trust and direct communication, to continue that communication with community about important issues. It means a lot to me, and so good luck to all of us in that effort. Thank you.
Thanks, Blair. Meeting's adjourned.